My daughter told me I did not fit the aesthetic of her wedding to a tech millionaire. She said my calloused hands would ruin the photos for Vogue magazine. They wanted my money, but they wanted me invisible. What they did not know was that the venue they booked, the catering company they hired, and the very ground they stood on belonged to the man they were ashamed to call father. And when I showed up with a yellow envelope instead of a check, the look on her face was worth every cent of the fortune I had hidden for 40 years. My name is Reginald King. I am 68 years old. To the outside world, I am just a retired electrician living in a clapboard house in South Atlanta, driving a truck that has seen 3 presidents come and go. To my daughter Tiana, I am an embarrassing relic of a blue-collar past she has tried desperately to scrub from her skin. She does not know that the electrical grid of this city runs on systems I optimized. She does not know that the skyline she admires is dotted with commercial real estate owned by shell companies that bear my initials. I taught her to walk, I taught her to read, but I failed to teach her the difference between price and value. That failure walked through my front door last Tuesday night in the form of Tiana and her fiancé, Hunter Sterling. They arrived at 9 in the evening without a call. The porch light flickered, casting long, distorted shadows of them against the peeling paint of my front door. I opened it to see Tiana looking like she had stepped out of a fashion editorial, her hair sleek, her dress costing more than my first car. Beside her was Hunter, a man of 30 who wore his privilege like a second skin. He was the CEO of a tech startup that was supposedly revolutionizing the market, though I had never quite understood what they actually sold. He offered me a tight, thin smile that did not reach his cold blue eyes. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. I moved to clear the evening newspaper from the kitchen table, but Tiana stopped me. She did not hug me. She did not ask how my arthritis was doing in this damp weather. She simply placed a thick, glossy binder on the table with a heavy thud. The cover read, "The Sterling King Nuptials, a Vision of Excellence." I thought this was my invitation. I reached for it, my fingers brushing the smooth cardstock. Tiana's hand shot out and rested on top of the binder, stopping me. "Dad, we need to talk about the logistics," she said. Her voice was professional, detached, the same tone she probably used to fire interns at her marketing firm. "Hunter and I have finalized the media rights with Vogue. This isn't just a wedding, it is a branding event. We are curating a very specific narrative of Black excellence merging with old money legacy." I looked at her confused. "I am Black. I have been excellent at my job for 45 years. I assumed that qualified me." "That sounds impressive, Tiana," I said slowly, sitting down in my creaky wooden chair. "I am happy for you. So when is the date?" Hunter cleared his throat. He remained standing, looking around my kitchen with open disdain. He stared at the water stain on the ceiling as if it were contagious. "Reggie, look," Hunter began. "He never called me Mr. King. He called me Reggie as if we were drinking buddies, yet he spoke to me like I was his gardener. The thing is, the aesthetic we are going for is extremely high concept. It is polished. It is elite. It is seamless." Tiana took a breath and looked me in the eye. "Dad, we aren't giving you an invitation tonight. This is a briefing. We have made a difficult decision regarding the guest list. The Sterling family will be there in full force. They are bringing senators, investors, people who can make or break Hunter's next funding round. The image has to be flawless." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "And I am a flaw?" I asked. My voice was steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. Tiana sighed as if my hurt feelings were a chore she had to complete. "Dad, look at you. Look at this place. You represent a struggle that doesn't fit the narrative we are selling. We are selling success, future, innovation. You are," Vintage Hunter interjected, smirking, "but not the cool kind of vintage, Reggie. You are the kind of vintage that smells like motor oil and old dust." Tiana nodded, emboldened by his cruelty. She reached out and took my hand. For a second I thought she was going to offer comfort. Instead, she flipped my hand over, palm up, exposing the thick, rough calluses and the jagged white scar that ran from my wrist to my thumb, a souvenir from a high-voltage line in 1998 that nearly killed me, but paid for her private school tuition. "These hands, Dad," she said, tracing the scar with a manicured fingernail. "They are rough. They are damaged. They don't look good in high-definition close-ups." Hunter's mother, Mrs. Sterling, mentioned that it might be uncomfortable for the guests to see such evidence of manual labor at the head table. It clashes with the theme. The silence in the kitchen was so heavy it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My daughter was ashamed of the hands that had built the foundation of her life. She was ashamed of the labor that had put clothes on her back and food in her stomach. So I am not invited, I stated. It was not a question. Oh, you are involved, Hunter said quickly, pulling a pen from his Italian suit pocket. That is the good news. We have created a special role for you. We call it the silent sponsor. Tiana opened the binder to a page marked budget. She tapped a figure at the bottom. $50,000. We need $50,000 to finalize the venue deposit and the catering upgrade, Tiana said. The Grand Royal Estate requires the final payment by tomorrow night, or we lose the date. Since you won't be attending and you won't have to pay for a suit or travel, we thought this would be your contribution, a way to be part of the day without complicating the visuals. They did not want me. They wanted my wallet. They assumed that because I lived simply, I had a small nest egg tucked away from decades of work, and they felt entitled to crack it open. They had no idea that $50,000 was what I made in a week from my commercial leases alone. Let me understand this, I said, leaning back and crossing my arms over my chest. You want me to pay $50,000 to secure a venue for a wedding I am not allowed to attend because my hands are too ugly for your magazines. It is an investment in my future, Dad, Tiana said, her voice hardening. Hunter's company is about to go public. This wedding is a networking goldmine. If you care about me, you will want me to shine. You will want me to secure my place in this world. Don't be selfish. You have saved money. I know you have your pension and the insurance payout from Mom. What else are you going to spend it on? You never go anywhere. Hunter checked his gold watch, clearly bored with the negotiation. Come on, Reggie. Be a team player. Think of it as passing the torch. You worked hard so Tiana wouldn't have to. This is you finishing the job. Sign the check and we will make sure to mention you in the program. In small print. In the back. I looked at the checkbook Tiana had helpfully placed in front of me. I looked at the pen Hunter was offering. I looked at my daughter, who was looking at me not with love, but with calculation. I need to think about it, I said. Hunter groaned. Think about what the deadline is tomorrow. I said I need to think. I repeated, my voice dropping an octave. It was the tone I used on construction sites when a foreman was about to make a dangerous mistake. It was a tone that brooked no argument. Fine, Tiana snapped, grabbing her purse. But if we lose the Grand Royal Estate because you are being stubborn, I will never forgive you. The transfer details are in the binder. Do it by morning. They walked out without saying goodbye. I watched from the window as they got into Hunter's leased Porsche. He said something that made Tiana laugh, a cruel, sharp sound. They sped away, leaving me alone in the kitchen that suddenly felt very cold. I sat there for a long time, staring at the scar on my hand. It was a badge of honor, not a mark of shame. But to them, I was just a resource to be mined and discarded. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking my trance. It was a text message from my bank. Security alert: unusual login attempt detected on your retirement investment account. Access tried from device Hunter's iPhone. Location 1240 Oak Street. My blood ran cold. 1240 Oak Street was my address. Hunter had not just come here to ask for money. While Tiana was distracting me with the binder and the insults about my hands, he had tried to hack into my accounts using my home Wi-Fi. He must have assumed I used simple passwords, or perhaps he had installed a keystroke logger when he asked to use my bathroom earlier. They were not just asking for $50,000. They were trying to gain access to everything. I did not call the police. Not yet. I had something far more effective than the police. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had not used in 5 years. Alvin, I said when the voice on the other end answered. It's Reggie. I need you to dust off your old IRS badge. I need a full financial colonoscopy on a man named Hunter Sterling. And Alvin, dig deep. I think he is drowning and he just tried to use me as a life raft. I looked at the binder on the table. A vision of excellence. I will give you a vision, I whispered to the empty room. I will show you exactly what a man with scarred hands can do when he decides to flip the breaker. Before I continue this story, I want to ask you, have you ever been underestimated by your own family because you chose to live simply? Let me know in the comments below. That night, I did not sleep. I sat in my armchair, the one with the worn velvet upholstery that Tiana hated, and I waited for Alvin to call back. The silence of the house was different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy, charged silence before a thunderstorm. At 6 in the morning, Alvin called. His voice was grim. Reggie, you are not going to believe this, Alvin said. Hunter Sterling isn't a tech genius. He is running a classic Ponzi scheme. His company Sterling Future Tech hasn't developed a single product. He is paying old investors with new money. He is being sued by 3 different vendors in New York, and he is 2 months away from a federal indictment. I gripped the phone tighter. And the wedding. It is a fundraising event, Reggie Alvin confirmed. He is broke, completely liquidating. He needs that wedding to dazzle a group of angel investors from Dubai who are on the guest list. If he doesn't close a deal at the reception, he goes to prison for fraud. He needs your $50,000 just to keep the lights on until the ceremony. I hung up the phone. A cold fury settled over me. Tiana was not marrying a millionaire. She was marrying a con artist, and she was willing to throw her own father into the trash to secure her spot next to him. Then my phone rang again. It was Tiana. Her voice was shrill, panicked, completely different from the cool executive tone she had used the night before. Dad, please pick up the venue just called. They said the preliminary hold on the date expired an hour ago. We need the money now. Hunter is freaking out. He says if we don't pay by noon, the whole wedding is off. Please, Daddy. I know I was harsh about your hands. I'm sorry. Just please send the money. I can't lose this. She was crying now. Fake tears, real panic. She wasn't afraid of losing a marriage. She was afraid of losing face. She was afraid of the public humiliation of a canceled society wedding. I looked at the transfer details in the binder. I looked at the bank account number for the catering company Hunter owed money to. I made a decision then. I would pay, but I would not pay Tiana. And I certainly would not pay Hunter. I picked up my phone and opened my banking app, the real one, the one linked to my commercial holdings, not the small checking account they knew about. I entered the account number for the debt collection agency that held Hunter's largest outstanding loan, a loan Alvin had identified as the most dangerous one held by a group that did not use lawyers to collect. I transferred $50,000 to them buying the debt. I am not just your father anymore, Tiana, I thought as I pressed confirm. I am now the owner of your husband's destruction. I sent a text to Tiana, handling it. The check is in the mail. It was the first lie I had told her in 20 years, and it tasted like justice. The wedding was still on, the trap was set, and I was going to be the one to spring it. I did not pace the floor. Pacing is for men who do not know what to do next. I sat in my armchair with the worn velvet upholstery and watched the dust motes dance in the shaft of moonlight cutting across the room. My phone sat on the small side table next to me like a loaded weapon. I had made the call to Alvin 10 minutes ago. Now I waited. Most people look at me and see a man who spent 40 years twisting wires and climbing utility poles. They see the grease under my fingernails that never quite scrubs out. They see the limp in my left leg from a fall on a job site in '98. They do not see the man who owns 40% of King Electric, the largest electrical contracting firm in the state. I stepped back from the day-to-day operations 15 years ago, but I never sold my shares. I stayed silent. I let my partners wear the suits and shake the hands at the Chamber of Commerce meetings. I preferred to be the man in the shadows, the one who reviewed the ledgers, the one who signed off on the acquisitions of commercial real estate. I know how money works. I know how it moves in the light, and I know how it moves in the dark. In the construction business, you learn to smell a rat long before you see its tail. You learn to spot the developers who drive Ferraris but cannot pay their subcontractors. You learn to recognize the hollow sound of a project that is built on debt and lies. Hunter Sterling had that hollow sound. When he walked into my kitchen and tried to hack my Wi-Fi, he confirmed what my gut had been telling me since the day Tiana brought him home. He was desperate. I poured myself a glass of bourbon cheap stuff that burned on the way down, just the way I liked it. I did not need the crystal decanters Tiana fawned over. I needed clarity. Alvin was the best forensic accountant the IRS had ever employed before he retired. He owed me a favor from a time I helped his brother out of a gambling debt that involved some very impatient loan sharks. I knew Alvin would dig deep. He would not just look at credit scores. He would look at shell companies, offshore transfers, and the dark corners where men like Hunter hid their secrets. The sun was just starting to bleed orange into the gray sky when my phone buzzed. It was Alvin. I picked up on the first ring. "Tell me," I said. My voice was gravel rough from a sleepless night. "Reggie, you are going to want to sit down for this," Alvin said. His voice was serious, devoid of the usual pleasantries. "I am sitting, Alvin. Just give it to me straight." "It is worse than we thought," Alvin said. "Hunter Sterling is not a tech mogul. He is a fraud. His company, Sterling Future Tech, has not developed a single piece of proprietary software. Not one. It is a ghost ship. I took a sip of bourbon. Go on. It is a classic Ponzi scheme, Reggie. He has been taking money from new investors to pay out dividends to the old ones to keep them happy. But the well has run dry. He is being sued by 3 different vendors in New York for non-payment. He has defaulted on 2 business loans. And here is the kicker. He is currently under investigation by the SEC. They haven't dropped the hammer yet, but they are circling. He is weeks, maybe days away from a federal indictment. I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. It was not the hot flash of rage. It was the freezing cold of absolute clarity. "And the wedding?" I asked. "It is a desperate Hail Mary," Alvin explained. "I looked into the guest list you mentioned. Those investors from Dubai, they are his last hope. He needs to get them into a room, dazzle them with a lavish event, and get them to sign a check before the feds knock on his door. He is broke, Reggie. Liquidated. He has drained his personal accounts, his parents' accounts, everything. He needs your $50,000 just to keep the lights on until the ceremony. If he does not pay the venue deposit by noon today, the whole thing collapses and the investors walk away. So my daughter is not a bride," I said softly. "She is a prop. She is collateral damage," Alvin corrected, "or an accomplice. I cannot tell yet how much she knows. But Hunter, he is a predator. He is drowning, and he is trying to stand on your shoulders to keep his head above water." "Thank you, Alvin," I said. "Send me the file. Specifically, I want the details on his most aggressive creditor, the one he is most afraid of." I hung up the phone. I sat there as the morning light filled the kitchen, illuminating the humble space Tiana was so ashamed of. She thought I was a simple man who did not understand her world of high finance and luxury. She had no idea that I had spent 40 years navigating sharks that would eat Hunter Sterling for breakfast. My phone rang again at 8 in the morning. It was Tiana. I let it ring twice before answering. I needed to make sure my voice was steady. "Hello, Tiana. Dad, please tell me you are awake." Her voice was shrill, panicked. It was a performance, but the fear underneath was real. She was terrified of humiliation. "I am awake, Tiana. What is the matter?" "The venue just called," she sobbed. "The Grand Royal Estate. They said the preliminary hold on the date expired an hour ago. We need the money now, Dad. Hunter is freaking out. He says if we don't pay by noon, they are going to release the date to another couple. The whole wedding will be off. The invitations have already gone out. The investors are flying in. Dad, please. I know I was harsh about your hands. I am so sorry." "I didn't mean it. Just please send the money. I can't lose this." I listened to her cry. I wondered if she even realized she was crying about money, not about her father's dignity. She was apologizing because she needed something, not because she was sorry. It was a transactional apology. "Calm down, Tiana," I said, my voice flat. "How much is the deposit again?" $50,000, she said, sniffing. "The transfer details are in the binder I left. Please, Dad, do it now." I looked at the glossy binder on my kitchen table. A vision of excellence. It was all a lie. A beautiful, expensive lie meant to cover up a rotting foundation. "I will handle it, Tiana," I said. "Really?" "You will do it." I said, "I will handle it. I will make a payment of $50,000 this morning." "Oh, thank you, Daddy, thank you. You are saving my life. I promise we will find a place for you at the wedding. Maybe not at the head table, but somewhere nice." I hung up the phone before I said something that would reveal my hand. She was still bargaining. She was still trying to hide me. I opened my laptop. I did not log into the small personal checking account Tiana knew about. I logged into my commercial holding account, the one I used to buy apartment complexes and shopping centers. The balance on the screen was a number Tiana could not even imagine. I pulled up the file Alvin had sent me. I found the name of the creditor, Vantage Debt Collection Agency. They were a firm known for buying toxic debt and collecting it aggressively. They held a note on Hunter Sterling for exactly $50,000, a personal loan he had taken out to cover gambling debts 2 years ago. It was the kind of debt that did not involve lawyers. It involved broken kneecaps if you waited too long. I picked up the phone and called the agency. I navigated through the automated system until I got a human being. "This is Reginald King," I said. "You hold a debt for a Mr. Hunter Sterling." Who was calling the agent asked, suspicious. "I am an interested party. I want to purchase the debt in full. Today." There was a pause. "You want to pay it off?" "No," I corrected him. "I want to buy the paper. I want to become the holder of the note. I want to own the debt." "That is unusual, sir, but if you have the funds, we can facilitate the transfer." "I have the funds," I said. 10 minutes later, the transaction was complete. I wired $50,000 to Vantage Debt Collection. In exchange, they assigned the legal rights to Hunter's debt to me. I sat back in my chair. I did not pay the wedding venue. The Grand Royal Estate would not receive a dime from me. Instead, I had just spent $50,000 to become the owner of Hunter Sterling's financial nightmare. Technically, I had kept my word to Tiana. I had made a payment of $50,000. I just had not paid who she wanted me to pay. I looked at my scarred hands. The hands that were too ugly for Vogue. These hands now held the leash to her fiancé's life. I sent a text message to Tiana. It is handled. The payment has been made. It was the first lie I had told my daughter in 20 years. But it was necessary. I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to think they had won. I needed them to walk into that wedding thinking they were untouchable. Because when you are standing on a trapdoor, the most dangerous thing you can feel is safe. I stood up and walked to the window. I watched the neighborhood wake up. The hardworking people of South Atlanta were heading to jobs that paid an honest sweat. They were the people Hunter Sterling mocked. They were the people my daughter was ashamed of. I was going to teach them both a lesson about value. I went to my closet and pulled out my old work uniform, the blue coveralls with my name Reggie stitched over the pocket. They were clean pressed and smelled faintly of ozone and hard work. Tiana wanted a silent sponsor. She wanted me to be invisible. I smiled for the first time in 2 days. I am going to be the loudest thing in that room, I whispered. The trap was set. The debt was mine. The wedding was still on, but the guest of honor was about to change. And Hunter Sterling was about to find out that the man he called Vintage was actually the one holding the demolition permit. I brushed the lint off the lapel of my charcoal suit. It was a suit I had bought 20 years ago for my wife's funeral, kept in plastic, preserved for occasions that required dignity. To me, it was my Sunday best. To the patrons of Le Jardin, the French restaurant where Tiana had summoned me, it likely looked like a costume from a period piece about the Great Depression. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror of my truck. My tie was straight, my shirt was starched. I looked like a man who paid his taxes and went to church. I looked like a father. Tiana had called me an hour ago. She did not ask if I wanted to come to the rehearsal dinner. She told me I was required. Not to eat, not to toast the happy couple, but to sign. Apparently, the lease for the penthouse they wanted in Midtown required a guarantor with a credit history longer than 5 years, something neither Tiana nor Hunter possessed. They needed my signature, and they needed it before the leasing office closed the next morning. I walked toward the entrance. The valet looked at my truck, then at me, and decided I was a delivery driver. He pointed toward the service entrance around the back. I ignored him and walked through the front doors. The air inside smelled of expensive perfume and truffle oil. Tiana was waiting by the host stand. She was wearing a silver dress that shimmered like liquid mercury. When she saw me, her face tightened. She scanned the room to see if anyone important had noticed the old man in the dated suit. "You made it," she said, her voice low. "Keep your voice down. The Sterlings are already seated. We are just going to do this quickly. You sign the papers, have a drink if you want, and then you can head out. We have speeches planned, and it might get long." She was uninviting me to the dinner I was currently attending. I nodded. I did not trust my voice. We walked to a private alcove in the back. The table was set with crystal and heavy silverware. Hunter sat at the head, laughing loudly at something his father had said. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, looked exactly as I imagined. Mr. Sterling wore a blazer with a crest on the pocket. Mrs. Sterling was a woman whose face had been pulled tight by surgery, leaving her with an expression of permanent surprise. When we approached the table, the conversation stopped. Hunter looked up, his eyes glassy with champagne. "Ah, the man of the hour," Hunter announced, though his tone was mocking. "Reggie, you found the place. I was worried you might get lost without a map, Mrs." Sterling turned her head slowly. She looked at my suit. She looked at my shoes, which were polished but worn. Then she looked at Tiana. "Oh, darling," she said to my daughter, "you didn't tell me your driver was staying for dinner." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. I looked at Tiana. I waited. This was the moment. This was the moment she could say, "That is my father. That is the man who worked double shifts to pay for my braces. That is the man who owns the building this restaurant leases its space from." Tiana looked at Mrs. Sterling. Then she looked at me. She smiled a tight, pained smile. He is just here to sign some papers, Victoria, Tiana said. He won't be staying long. She did not correct her. She let her future mother-in-law believe I was hired help. She let the woman erase my identity because it was more convenient than admitting she came from my blood. The waiter approached, holding an extra chair. Mrs. Sterling waved a hand dismissively. Just put it at the end, she told the waiter. Give him the kids' menu or something quick. We have toasts to get to. I sat in the chair. It was positioned slightly away from the main group as if I were a child in timeout. I placed my hands on my lap to hide the tremors of rage that were starting to vibrate through my fingers. Hunter poured more wine for his parents, ignoring my empty glass. So Hunter continued as I was saying. The investment capital is practically secured. We have a silent backer who just came through with a massive injection of funds this morning. $50,000 just to secure the venue. He winked at me. It was a power move. He was bragging about my money, the money he thought he had swindled from me, right to my face. Mr. Sterling nodded approvingly. Smart. You always were good at finding resources, son. It is important to leverage assets. Exactly, Hunter said, leaning back. You find the people who have a little saved up, people who don't know how to make their money work for them, and you give them an opportunity. You do them a favor, really. He was talking about me as if I were a golden goose he had successfully plucked. He thought I was the mark. He thought I was the fool at the table. Tiana reached under the table and pulled out a leather folder. She slid it across the white tablecloth toward me. It bumped against my untouched water glass. Here is the lease guarantee, Dad, she whispered, not making eye contact. Just sign at the bottom of the last page. It just says you will cover the rent if we miss a month. Standard stuff. I opened the folder. The document was thick. I pretended to read it, squinting my eyes. I reached into my pocket for my reading glasses, the cheap drugstore kind I knew Tiana hated. Hunter leaned over. He smelled of bourbon and arrogance. Just sign it, Reggie, he hissed, his voice low so his parents wouldn't hear. Don't pretend you are reading the fine print. We both know you wouldn't understand the legal jargon anyway. Sign it and then get out of here. This isn't a cafeteria. You don't belong here. He wanted me gone. He wanted my signature, my money, and my absence. He wanted the perfect image of a self-made man unencumbered by a blue-collar father-in-law. I looked at him. I saw the fear behind his eyes. He was terrified that I would say something that I would embarrass him, that I would reveal the $50,000 came from me. He was bullying me because he was afraid of me. I decided to give him exactly what he wanted. I am sorry, I said, my voice shaking. I feigned a tremor in my hand, dropping the pen. My nerves. I get nervous in fancy places. I bent down to pick up the pen. As I dipped below the table, I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I had a folder there identical to the one Tiana had given me. I had prepared it that afternoon with my lawyer Bernie. In one smooth motion, shielded by the tablecloth, I dropped Tiana's folder onto the floor and pulled mine out. I came back up, placing my folder on the table. I apologized again. I am so clumsy. Hunter rolled his eyes. Jesus, just sign the damn thing. He tapped the signature line on the last page. The document I had placed on the table looked exactly like a standard lease agreement on the front page, but the last page, the page he was pointing to, was very different. It was a transfer of liability and debt acknowledgement. It was a legal document that stated the signer accepted full personal responsibility for all outstanding debts held by the shell company, Sterling Future Tech, piercing the corporate veil and attaching the debt to his personal assets. It also acknowledged that the $50,000 transferred that morning was a personal loan from Reginald King, payable on demand with his future assets as collateral. It was a death sentence for his financial future. I held the pen over the paper. My hand shook. Are you sure this is just for the apartment? I asked, playing the part of the confused old man. Yes, yes, Hunter snapped. He looked away, waving at a waitress to bring another bottle of wine. He was too busy being the big shot to read what was in front of him. He was too busy performing for his parents to notice the trap. Tiana was looking at her phone, texting someone, ignoring the transaction completely. I pressed the pen to the paper. I did not sign my name. I signed the line that said, Witness. Then I pushed the folder toward Hunter. You need to sign as the primary tenant first, I said. That is how the bank wants it. Hunter sighed, an exaggerated sound of annoyance. He grabbed the pen from my hand. He didn't even look at the header of the page. He didn't read a single word. He He just wanted the paper signed so he could get back to his champagne. He scribbled his signature with a flourish. Hunter Sterling. There, he said, shoving the folder back at me. Now you sign the guarantor line. I signed my name below his. It was done. He had just legally acknowledged that he owed me everything. He had just signed away his financial freedom to the man he called a driver. I closed the folder. I did not give it back to Tiana. I slid it into my jacket pocket. I need to make a copy for my records, I said, standing up. I will drop it off at the leasing office myself tomorrow morning. I know the manager. Tiana looked up surprised. You will? Yes, I said. I want to make sure it is done right. Hunter waved a hand. Fine. Whatever. Just go. I stood there for a moment looking at them. The Sterlings were debating the merits of summering in the Hamptons versus the Vineyard. Tiana was checking her makeup in her phone camera. Hunter was pouring more wine, the king of his own imaginary castle. None of them looked at me. I was already gone to them. Goodbye, Tiana, I said. She didn't look up. Bye, Dad. Thanks for the money. I walked away from the table. I walked through the dining room past the people eating meals that cost more than my weekly grocery bill. I walked out the front door past the valet who still thought I was a delivery driver. I got into my truck and placed the folder on the passenger seat. I patted it gently. Hunter Sterling thought he had just secured a penthouse. He had actually just signed a confession. I started the engine. The rumble of the old truck was a comforting sound. I wasn't going home to sleep. I was going to meet the manager of the Grand Royal Estate. I had a venue to inspect, and I had some very specific instructions to give regarding the lighting system for tomorrow's wedding. Hunter wanted a show. I was going to give him a blackout. I sat in the cab of my truck with the engine idling and the air conditioner fighting a losing battle against the Atlanta heat. In my hands, I held a copy of Southern Elite Living. It was a glossy magazine that usually featured recipes for pecan pie and interviews with debutantes, but today it featured my daughter. Tiana was on page 14. She looked radiant in a white dress that was not her wedding gown but cost enough to feed a family for a month. The headline above her head read, "The Heartbreak Behind the Perfect Wedding." I adjusted my reading glasses, the ones Tiana hated because she said they made me look ancient, and I read the words that killed the last ounce of hope I had for her. The article was a masterpiece of fiction. Tiana described her upcoming nuptials to Hunter Sterling as a fairy tale, but then she dropped the hammer. She told the reporter that her father would not be walking her down the aisle. She did not say it was because my hands were scarred or because I did not fit her aesthetic. She said it was because I was gone. She claimed I was suffering from early onset dementia. She said I no longer recognized her face. She said I became agitated in crowds and that for my own safety, I was being cared for in a specialized memory facility. She painted herself as the tragic heroine forcing a smile through the pain of losing her father to the fog of a disease I did not have. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were sharp. My mind was clearer than it had ever been. I remembered the day she was born. I remembered the day I taught her to ride a bike. I remembered the exact balance in my bank account down to the cent. I was not senile. I was inconvenient. Tiana had decided that the only way to explain my absence without looking like a snob was to clinically erase me. She had murdered my competency to save her social standing. I threw the magazine onto the passenger seat. The rage I felt was cold and heavy like a stone in my gut. I put the truck in gear. I was not going to let this stand. I was not going to let her rewrite my history while I was still living it. I drove straight to the glass tower in Buckhead where Tiana's marketing firm rented the entire 30th floor. I did not call ahead. I did not ask for permission. When I arrived, the lobby was a hive of activity. Young people with expensive coffees and wireless headphones rushed past me. I wore my clean work clothes, a button-down shirt and slacks, but no jacket. I looked like a man who worked for a living, which meant in this building, I looked like a trespasser. I walked past the security desk before the guard could look up from his phone and got into the elevator. I pressed the button for the 30th floor. The doors opened into a space that smelled of ambition and ozone. The receptionist, a young woman with bright pink hair, looked up with a practiced smile that vanished when she saw me. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, reaching for her phone. "I am here to see Tiana King," I said, walking past her desk. "Sir, you cannot just go back there. She is in a strategy meeting," she called out, chasing after me. I did not stop. I knew exactly where her office was because I had paid the security deposit for this space 3 years ago when she started the company. I marched down the hallway past glass-walled conference rooms where people were drawing on whiteboards. I found the room at the end, the one with the view of the city I had helped build. Tiana was standing at the head of a long table. She was holding a laser pointer, presenting a slide deck to a group of 10 people. They were all looking at her with admiration. She was selling them a vision, just like she was selling the world a lie about me. I pushed the door open. It hit the stopper with a loud bang. Every head in the room turned. Tiana froze. The laser pointer in her hand shook, sending a red dot dancing across the screen. "Dad," she whispered. The color drained from her face. I walked up to the table and slammed the magazine down in front of her. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right next to her hand. "Is this what I am to you, Tiana?" I asked, my voice booming in the quiet room. "A tragedy. A senile old man who does not know his own name." The room went silent. Her employees looked from me to the magazine and back to her. They were confused. This was the man who was supposed to be in a memory care facility, the man who supposedly did not recognize his own daughter. Yet here I was, looking her in the eye with a clarity that cut bone deep. Tiana recovered quickly. I saw the gears turning in her head. She realized she was cornered. If she admitted she lied, she would lose her credibility with her team. She would be exposed as a fraud. So she did the only thing a coward could do. She doubled down. Her face crumpled into a mask of pity and fear. She dropped the laser pointer and brought her hands to her mouth. "Oh God," she said, her voice trembling. "Dad, how did you get out? You are not supposed to be here. You are confused." I stared at her. She was good. She was terrifyingly good. "I am not confused, Tiana," I said, stepping closer. "I am reading your lies. You told the world I have dementia because you are ashamed of me. You declared me incompetent because you wanted my money without my presence." Tiana backed away as if I were a physical threat. She looked at her colleagues, pleading for help. "Please, someone call security," she cried. "He is having an episode. He gets aggressive when he is like this. He thinks people are stealing from him. It is part of the disease." One of the men at the table, a heavy-set guy in a cheap suit, stood up and moved between us. "Sir, you need to calm down," he said, holding up his hands. "Let us get you some help." I looked at the man. I looked at my daughter. She was hiding behind her lie, using it as a shield. She was willing to destroy my reputation, my sanity, and my freedom, just to keep her story straight. "I am not the one who needs help," I said to the man. "Ask her who paid for this office. Ask her who paid for her car. Ask her who just paid off her fiancé's debt this morning." Tiana screamed, "Dad, stop it. You do not know what you are saying. You are hallucinating." 2 uniformed security guards burst into the room. They saw an older black man raising his voice at a young, crying woman. They did not see a father teaching his daughter a lesson. They saw a threat. "Grab him," Tiana sobbed, pointing at me. "Please just get him out of here before he hurts himself. Take him downstairs. I will call the facility to come pick him up." The guards grabbed my arms. They were rough. They twisted my shoulders back. I did not fight them. I did not struggle. Fighting would only prove her point. Fighting would make me look like the crazy man she painted me to be. I stood tall. I let them hold me. I looked Tiana dead in the eye. She stopped crying instantly. She looked at me with a cold triumph. She thought she had won. She thought she had neutralized the threat. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life, Tiana," I said, my voice low and steady. "I came here to give you a chance to retract this. I came here to give you a chance to tell the truth." "Get him out of here," she hissed at the guards, dropping the act for just a second. The guards began to drag me toward the door. I dug my heels in for one last moment. "You think you are saving your image," I said. "But you just threw away your last lifeline. When the lights go out, Tiana, do not call me. I am the one cutting the cord." The guards shoved me into the hallway. The door to the conference room closed, but through the glass I saw Tiana straighten her jacket and turn back to her team. She wiped a fake tear from her eye and continued her presentation. They escorted me to the elevator and rode down with me. They marched me through the lobby past the staring receptionist and threw me out onto the sidewalk. "Stay away from the building, sir, or we will call the police," one guard warned. I adjusted my shirt. I smoothed my hair. I looked up at the glass tower one last time. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The grief was gone. The shock was gone. All that was left was business. Tiana had declared war. She had used my love against me. She had used my silence against me. Now she was going to see what happened when the silent partner decided to liquidate the assets. I walked to my truck. I took out my phone and dialed the number for the general manager of the Grand Royal Estate. It was time to inspect my property. It was time to prepare the venue. My daughter wanted a wedding that people would never forget. I was going to make sure she got exactly that. I started the engine. The road ahead was clear. I was not confused. I was not lost. I knew exactly where I was going, and I knew exactly what I had to do. The father she knew was gone. The landlord had just arrived. I drove my truck through the wrought iron gates of the Grand Royal Estate. The guard at the booth glanced at my blue coveralls and the logo on the side of my door and waved me through without a second look. To him, I was just another contractor coming to fix a leak or check a fuse box before the big event. Invisibility was a cloak I had worn for decades, and today, it was my armor. The estate was a sprawling masterpiece of Georgian architecture sitting on 50 acres of manicured gardens just outside the city limits. It had white columns that rose like redwoods, and a fountain in the circular driveway that cost more than my first house. I parked my truck around the back near the kitchen loading dock next to the catering vans and florists. I killed the engine and sat for a moment listening to the ticking of the cooling metal. I walked around the side of the main building, keeping to the shadows of the colonnade. I could hear voices drifting from the south terrace, loud, boisterous voices echoing off the stone. I moved closer, stepping softly on the grass until I had a clear view. Hunter Sterling was standing on the terrace, surrounded by 5 other men. They all wore suits that cost thousands, tailored to fit bodies that had never done a day of hard labor. They were holding tumblers of amber liquid, swirling the ice and looking out over the grounds with the possessive gaze of conquerors. "This is incredible, Hunter," one of the men said, gesturing with his cigar. "I did not know you had holdings in real estate. I thought you were strictly software." Hunter laughed, a sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. "You have to diversify, Bradley. Tech is the engine, but land is the anchor. I picked this place up a few months ago. It was a distressed asset. The previous owners did not know what they had. I made a few calls, pulled a few strings, and got it for a song. We are going to rebrand it as a luxury retreat for our executive tier members." He took a sip of his drink and smiled. "This wedding is not just a celebration, boys. It is a grand opening. I own the dirt we are standing on." I felt a muscle twitch in my jaw. The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. Hunter did not own a square inch of this property. He did not even have the money to pay the deposit to rent it for the weekend. He was standing on my terrace, drinking my scotch and selling my hard work as his own genius to a group of investors he was planning to defraud. I bought this place 10 years ago when it was a rotting shell. The roof had caved in, the wiring was a fire hazard, and the gardens were a jungle of kudzu and poison ivy. I bought it through a shell company called Monarch Holdings because I knew that if the city council found out a black man from the South Side was buying the historic landmark, they would have buried me in red tape. I spent 2 years restoring it with my own hands. I rewired every room. I laid the marble in the foyer. I planted the oak trees that now shaded the driveway. Hunter was claiming my sweat equity as his portfolio padding. One of the men clapped Hunter on the back. "Impressive, Sterling. Very impressive. This creates a lot of confidence for the Dubai deal. If you can manage assets like this, the software expansion should be a breeze." "That is the plan," Hunter said, winking. "We sign the papers tomorrow night at the reception. Once the ink is dry on the wedding certificate, we sign the Series B funding round. It is going to be a night for the history books." I stepped back into the shadows. I had heard enough. He was using my property to bait a trap for his victims. He was selling a lie wrapped in my brick and mortar. I walked to the service entrance and punched the code into the keypad. The door clicked open. I walked through the bustling kitchen. Chefs were shouting orders, chopping vegetables and prepping sauces. They ignored me, assuming I was maintenance. I walked past them and down a quiet hallway lined with black and white photos of the estate's history. At the end of the hall was a heavy oak door marked General Manager Private. I did not knock. I opened the door and walked in. The office was cool and quiet, smelling of lemon polish and old paper. A man was sitting behind the massive mahogany desk reviewing a stack of invoices. He was in his 50s with graying hair and a suit that was immaculate. He looked up, sharp annoyance crossing his face at the intrusion. "Excuse me," he started to say, rising from his chair. "This is a private area. Staff are not." Then he saw my face. The annoyance vanished instantly, replaced by a look of shock, and then deep respect. He scrambled out from behind the desk, adjusting his tie. "Mr. King," he said, his voice dropping to a hush, I did not know you were coming today. I would have prepared the staff. Hello, Elias, I said, closing the door behind me. I sat down in one of the leather guest chairs. You do not need to prepare anyone. I am not here for a tour. Elias remained standing, clasping his hands in front of him. It is an honor, sir. We are just finalizing the preparations for the Sterling wedding tomorrow. It is a massive production. I know, I said. I looked around the office. I saw the framed awards on the wall, Hospitality Excellence Venue of the Year. I had paid for the renovations that made those awards possible. How are the accounts, Elias? Elias hesitated. Well, sir, that is actually a matter I was going to call you about. The client, Mr. Sterling. His payment for the venue balance is showing as pending. You sent a directive yesterday saying the payment was handled, but we never received a wire transfer. I assumed you made an internal adjustment since it was a family event, but I wanted to be sure. I looked at him. Elias was a good man. He ran a tight ship. He knew Tiana was my daughter, but he had never met her. I kept my business and my personal life strictly separated. The payment is handled, I said, but not by Mr. Sterling. I purchased his debt from a third-party creditor. Technically, he owes me the money, not the venue. Elias looked confused, but nodded. I see. So we proceed as normal. Not exactly, I said. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. I want to see the file for the event, specifically the guest list. Elias went to a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. He handed it to me. I opened it. I scanned the pages. There were 300 names listed in alphabetical order. I saw the names of the Sterling family. I saw the names of the investors Hunter was trying to swindle. I saw the names of Tiana's friends from college. I saw the names of local politicians and socialites. I ran my finger down the K's Kennedy, Kerr, Kinsley. There was no King. My name was not on the list. Tiana had not just uninvited me, she had erased me. There was no seat for me at the back. There was no table for the driver. I simply did not exist in the world she had built for tomorrow night. I closed the folder gently. The paper felt cool against my fingertips. Is everything all right, Sir Elias asked, watching me closely. Everything is exactly as it should be, I said, standing up. I handed the folder back to him. Elias, I have some specific instructions for tomorrow night. These instructions supersede anything the wedding planner or the groom tells you. Do you understand? Yes, sir. You are the owner. Your word is law. Good, I said. I walked over to the large schematic of the estate on the wall. It showed the electrical grid, the security zones, and the access points. I tapped the main breaker room located in the basement. I want you to let them set up everything. Let the florists bring in the roses. Let the caterers prep the lobster. Let the band do their sound check. I want the champagne chilled and the lights dim and romantic. Let Mr. Sterling believe he is the king of the castle. Elias nodded, taking notes on a pad. But at 8:00 sharp, I continued, I want you to initiate a hard reset of the main electrical system. I want the master override engaged. A blackout, sir, Elias asked, his pen pausing. Not a blackout, I corrected him. A lockout. I want you to change the access codes for the main gates and the electronic doors. Set them to my personal master code, code King01. Elias looked up, his eyes wide. That will lock everyone inside the perimeter, sir, and it will cut the microphones and the stage lights. Exactly, I said. At 8:00, the only thing that works in this building is the emergency spotlight on the main stage and the single microphone plugged into the backup generator. I understand, Elias said slowly. He was putting the pieces together. He knew something was happening. He knew this was not a standard request, but he also knew who signed his paycheck. One more thing, I said, walking to the door. When the lights go out, mister, Sterling is going to scream for a manager. He is going to demand to know who cut the power. You are going to go out there with a flashlight and you are going to tell him that the chairman has revoked his privileges due to non-payment. The chairman, Elias repeated. Yes, I said. And when he asks who the chairman is, you are going to introduce me. I will be waiting in the wings. Elias straightened his back. It will be done, Mr. King. I opened the door. The noise of the kitchen flooded back in. And Elias, I added, looking back. Make sure the security team is on standby. I have a feeling the groom might get violent when he realizes he does not own the dirt he is standing on. I will have them ready, sir. I walked out of the office and back through the kitchen. I slipped out the side door and into the humid afternoon air. I climbed into my truck and drove toward the exit. I passed the terrace where Hunter was still holding court. laughing with his cigar in hand. He looked like a man who had won the lottery. He had no idea that the ticket in his pocket was a forgery. I drove home to my clapboard house. I had one more night to wait. I had one more act to play before the curtain came down. Tomorrow night, Tiana wanted a vision of excellence. I was going to give her a vision of reality. And for Hunter Sterling, the reality was going to be a very dark place indeed. The rain beat against the siding of my house like a handful of gravel thrown by an angry child. It was 7 in the evening, exactly 24 hours before the wedding that was supposed to crown Hunter Sterling as the new king of Atlanta. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee watching the headlights of Hunter's Porsche cut through the storm. They were back. They were not here for money this time. They had already taken what they thought was my $50,000. No, this visit was about something much darker. This visit was about cleanup. Tiana opened the door without knocking. She did not wipe her feet. She tracked mud onto the linoleum floor I had scrubbed on my hands and knees for 30 years. Hunter followed her carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it cost more than the furniture in the room. He did not look at me. He looked at his watch as if being in my presence was costing him billable hours. "Hey, Dad," Tiana said. Her voice was tight, brittle. She was wearing a raincoat, but she had not buttoned it. She looked like she was ready to run. "Hello, Tiana," I said, keeping my hands wrapped around the mug. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "We have some paperwork," Hunter said, slamming the briefcase onto the table. He popped the latches. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the small kitchen. "Just some administrative things we need to clear up before the big day. Insurance stuff. You know how it is." He slid a thick stack of papers toward me. The document on top was titled Senior Care and Medical Proxy Expansion. "It is for your health insurance," Reggie Hunter said, uncapping a fountain pen. "Tiana was worried that your current coverage is not enough, especially with your condition." "My condition?" I asked. "The dementia," Tiana said, quickly looking at the floor. "The article, Dad. We have to make it look real. If something happens to you, we need to be able to make medical decisions. This just gives us the power to upgrade your care. It authorizes us to move you to a facility that can handle your needs." I looked at the document. I did not need to read the fine print to know what it was. I had seen these before in my line of work when greedy children tried to push their parents out of family businesses. It was a full guardianship and power of attorney. It gave them the right to commit me involuntarily to a state-run facility. It gave them the right to liquidate my assets, including this house, to pay for my care. They were not planning to upgrade my insurance. They were planning to lock me away. They wanted to throw me into a hole so they could sell my house and use the equity to pay off the debts I now owned. They wanted to erase me completely. I felt a fire in my chest, hot and fierce. My own daughter was standing there waiting for me to sign away my freedom. She was willing to put me in a cage to keep her lie alive. "Is this necessary?" I asked, my voice trembling. Not from fear, but from the effort it took not to break Hunter's jaw. "It is standard procedure," Tiana said. "Please, Dad, just sign it. We have a rehearsal to get back to. We do not have time for this." I looked at Hunter. He was tapping the pen on the table. Tap, tap, tap. He was impatient. He was arrogant. He thought I was a senile old man who would sign anything to make his daughter happy. "I need my reading glasses," I said, my voice raspy. "I cannot see the lines." Hunter rolled his eyes and sighed loud and long. "Jesus, Reggie. Just sign by the X. You do not need to read it. It is boilerplate." "I cannot sign what I cannot see," I insisted. I stood up slowly, feigning a stiffness in my knees that was not there. I shuffled toward the counter where my junk drawer was. I let my hand shake. I let my shoulders slump. I became the old man they wanted me to be. I opened the drawer. Inside, underneath a stack of coupons and old batteries, was a manila envelope. My lawyer, Bernie, had prepared it 3 hours ago. Inside was a document that looked exactly like the one on the table. Same font, same weight of paper, same layout. But the text was very different. I grabbed my glasses. I also grabbed the envelope, sliding it under the sleeve of my oversized cardigan. I shuffled back to the table. I started coughing, a wet, hacking cough that made Tiana step back in disgust. She covered her nose. "Can I get some water?" I wheezed, pointing to the sink. Tiana groaned but turned around to fill a glass. Hunter looked at her, annoyed that she was wasting time. In that second of distraction, I made my move. I pretended to stumble. I dropped my glasses on the table. They clattered loudly. Hunter flinched and looked down. "Watch it, old man," he snapped. While his eyes were on the glasses, my hand moved with the speed of a man who had wired high-voltage boxes without looking. I swept their document off the table and into my lap, sliding it between my knees. In the same motion, I slid my document from my sleeve onto the table. It was seamless. A magic trick performed by a master craftsman. I sat down heavily panting as if the exertion had exhausted me. "Here," Tiana said, slamming a glass of water down. "Drink. Then sign." I took a sip. My hand shook, spilling water on the table. Hunter pulled the papers back to save them from the moisture. He did not look at the text. He was too busy wiping water off his expensive cuff. He pushed the papers back toward me. "Sign," he ordered, pointing to the line. I put on my glasses. I looked at the page. It was my document. The header read, "Liability Acceptance and Debt Consolidation Agreement." The text stated that the undersigned Hunter Sterling acknowledged full personal liability for all debts incurred by Sterling Future Tech, including the $50,000 note purchased by Reginald King. It stated that he waived all rights to corporate bankruptcy protection. It stated that any assets he possessed or would possess in the future, including real estate and inheritances, would be used to satisfy the debt. It was a confession. It was a surrender. And he was too busy looking at his phone to notice. I picked up the pen. I let the tip hover over the paper. "Are you sure this will take care of me?" I asked, looking up at him. Yes, it takes care of everything," Hunter said, not looking up from his text message. "You will never have to worry about money again." That was true. I would never have to worry about his money again because it was about to be mine. I signed my name on the witness line. Then I pushed the paper toward him. "You have to sign as the guardian," I said. "That is what the bank said last time." Hunter scoffed. He grabbed the pen. He did not read the title. He did not read the clauses. He just saw a line that needed a signature so he could leave this house and get back to his champagne. He scribbled his name, Hunter Sterling. He signed it with a flourish, big and bold. He signed away his life. He signed away his future. He signed away his freedom. "Done," he said, snatching the paper. He shoved it into his briefcase without a second glance. He clicked the latches shut. "See, that was not so hard, was it, Reggie?" He stood up, buttoning his jacket. He looked at me with a smirk that was pure evil. "Now pack a bag, old man. We are coming for you on Monday morning. We found a place for you. It is not the Ritz, but it is what we can afford since you are so stingy with your funds." Tiana looked at me. Her eyes were cold. "It is for the best, Dad," she said. "You will be safer there. You will not be a burden to anyone." A burden. That was the word she used. The man who carried her on his shoulders was a burden. "Where is this place?" I asked, my voice quiet. "It is a state facility," Hunter said, laughing. "Shady Pines or something. It is cheap. It smells like urine and boiled cabbage. But hey, it is a roof over your head. You fit the aesthetic there, Reggie. You fit right in." They walked toward the door. They did not look back. They stepped out into the rain and ran toward the Porsche. I watched the taillights fade into the darkness. I sat there in the silence of my kitchen. The real document, the one they had brought, was still between my knees. I pulled it out and ripped it in half. Then I ripped it again and again until it was nothing but confetti. I threw the pieces into the trash can. They thought they had just signed my committal papers. They thought they had won. They thought they were going to throw me into a state home and sell my house. Instead, Hunter had just accepted personal responsibility for millions of dollars in fraud. He had just handed me the legal right to strip him of everything he owned. I looked at the clock. It was 8:30. Tomorrow at 8 o'clock, the lights would go out at the Grand Royal Estate. I stood up and walked to the window. The rain was stopping. The clouds were breaking. "You want to send me to a home, Hunter," I whispered to the empty room. "I have a better idea. I am going to send you to hell, and I am going to make sure you enjoy the ride." I went to my bedroom and opened my closet. I pushed aside the suits and the flannel shirts. In the back hung my work uniform. The blue coveralls were clean and pressed. My tool belt hung on a hook beside them. I ran my fingers over the leather pouches, feeling the weight of the pliers and the wire cutters. These were the tools of my trade. These were the tools that built a fortune, and tomorrow night they were going to dismantle a lie. I took the envelope with the $50,000 debt note out of my safe. I placed it on the dresser. Next to it, I placed the document Hunter had just signed. 2 pieces of paper. 2 nails in a coffin. I turned off the light and went to sleep. I slept soundly. I slept peacefully. I slept like a man who knew exactly what the morning would bring. The storm outside had passed, but the real storm, the one I had summoned, was just beginning. And it was going to be magnificent. The sun set over the grand royal estate, turning the white marble columns into pillars of gold. From my vantage point in the service lane, I watched the theater of excess unfold. It was grotesque. It was a display of wealth so desperate and loud it screamed of insolvency to anyone who knew how to listen. Tiana had gotten her wish. The driveway was lined with imported Italian cypress trees brought in just for the night. The air smelled of white roses flown in from Tuscany, thousands of them covering every surface to hide the panic rotting underneath. I watched through binoculars as the guests arrived. They stepped out of limousines and vintage Rolls-Royces. Men in tuxedos, women in silk gowns that cost more than my truck. Flashbulbs popped as local society photographers captured the arrival of the investors from Dubai. They were the marks the prey hunter intended to bleed dry before the night was over. Hunter stood at the top of the grand staircase. He looked the part of the billionaire genius. His tuxedo was bespoke, his smile was dazzling, and his hand rested possessively on the lower back of a man I recognized as the head of a venture capital firm worth billions. Hunter was laughing, selling the dream, selling the lie that he owned this estate, that he was a titan of industry. Then I saw Tiana. She was standing by the fountain. She wore a dress that was an architectural marvel of lace and satin. She looked beautiful. She also looked terrified. Her smile was tight. Her eyes were darting around the crowd, looking for cracks in the facade. She was holding a glass of champagne, but her knuckles were white. She knew that the checks had not cleared. She knew that the deposit I supposedly paid was just a stopgap. She was waiting for the other shoe to drop, not realizing that the shoe was currently on my foot and I was about to kick the door down. I saw Hunter lean in and whisper something to her. He kissed her cheek. It looked romantic to the cameras. Through the binoculars, I saw the tension in his jaw. He was telling her to smile harder. He was telling her that the deal was almost closed. He was telling her that once the papers were signed at the reception, they would be safe. Safe. That was the one thing they were not. The orchestra began to play a soaring melody. Waiters in white gloves moved through the crowd with silver trays of caviar and foie gras. It was a scene from a movie, a perfect picture of American royalty, and it was all built on a foundation of fraud, theft, and the betrayal of a father. I put the binoculars down on the dashboard of my truck. I picked up my tool belt. It was heavy, worn leather stained with grease and sweat. I strapped it around my waist over my blue coveralls. The name Reggie was stitched in red thread over my heart. I picked up my yellow hard hat and my heavy steel toolbox. Finally, I picked up the manila envelope from the passenger seat. Inside were the receipts. Inside was the truth. It was 8 o'clock. It was time to go to work. I opened the truck door and stepped out. The gravel crunched under my work boots. I walked toward the main gate, not the service entrance. I walked right down the center of the driveway, past the parked Bentleys and the chauffeurs who stared at me with open confusion. I walked with the rhythm of a man who had laid the conduit beneath this asphalt. I walked with the stride of a man who knew where every breaker and every switch was located because I had installed them. The security guards at the main entrance saw me coming. They were hired muscle private contractors Hunter had brought in to keep the riffraff out. They stepped forward, blocking my path. They looked at my coveralls. They looked at my toolbox. They sneered. "Sir, you are in the wrong place," one of them said, crossing his massive arms. "Deliveries are around back, and you are late." I did not stop walking until I was 2 feet from his face. "I am not a delivery driver," I said, my voice low and steady. "I am the owner." The guard laughed. A short barking sound. "Yeah, and I am the King of England. Turn around, Pops. Get that junk off the property before I throw you off." The commotion caught the attention of the guests near the entrance. Heads turned. Whispers started. A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. A man in dirty work clothes was disrupting the perfect aesthetic. Then the Sterlings appeared. Hunter's parents, Victoria and Richard Sterling, rushed down the steps, their faces twisted in horror. They saw me. They saw the coveralls. They saw the threat to their image. Victoria Sterling reached me first. She looked at me with a mixture of revulsion and fury that was almost impressive in its intensity. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "You insane old man! Have you lost your mind completely?" I looked at her. I looked at her diamond necklace bought with credit she probably could not pay. "I am just checking the wiring, Victoria," I said calmly. "Safety first." "Get out!" Richard Sterling shouted, stepping up beside his wife. He waved his hands at the guards. "Get him out of here. He is trespassing. He is senile. He thinks he works here." The guests were staring openly now. The investors from Dubai were watching with interest. The perfect image was cracking. "Go back to your slum," Reggie Hunter's father spat at me. "Go back to your hole. You are embarrassing your daughter. You are ruining everything. Do you want her to see you like this? Like a beggar? Like dirt?" I looked up at the top of the stairs. Tiana had appeared. She froze when she saw me. She saw her father standing there being screamed at by her in-laws, being manhandled by security. She did not run down to help me. She did not scream for them to stop. She turned her head away. She looked back toward the ballroom, pretending she had not seen a thing. That was the final seal. That was the end. I looked back at the Sterlings. "I am not trespassing," I said. "I am inspecting my investment." And then I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a demolition expert pressing the plunger. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I had the app open. The master control app for the Grand Royal Estate's smart grid system. A system I had designed. A system I controlled. "Get him out now!" Victoria shrieked. "He is ruining the photo op!" I pressed the button marked Master Override. The click was silent, but the result was deafening. With a sound like a thunderclap, every floodlight, every chandelier, every twinkle light in the trees, and every speaker on the estate died instantly. Total darkness swallowed the Grand Royal Estate. The music cut out with a dying groan. The fountain pump stopped silencing the water. The only light came from the moon and the terrified glow of cell phone screens that popped up like fireflies in the blackness. Screams erupted from the crowd. It was not the scream of excitement. It was the scream of rich people who suddenly realized they were not in control. I stood there in the dark, my thumb hovering over the screen. "You wanted a silent sponsor," I whispered into the chaos. "Welcome to the silence." The darkness was absolute. It was not the gentle dimming of lights for a romantic dance. It was a suffocating, heavy blackness that fell like a curtain of lead. For a moment there was only silence, the kind of stunned vacuum that follows an explosion. Then the panic set in. It started with a single scream from the back of the crowd, probably from a debutante who had spilled her champagne in the dark. Then it multiplied. A cacophony of shouts, gasps, and the sound of expensive glassware shattering on the pavement filled the air. I stood perfectly still in the center of the driveway. My eyes had already adjusted to the night. I watched the chaos unfold with the detached precision of a general surveying a battlefield. The glow of hundreds of cell phone screens ignited, illuminating terrified faces in ghostly blue light. The investors from Dubai were huddled together, surrounded by their bodyguards who had drawn flashlights and were scanning the perimeter for a threat. They looked ready to evacuate. The deal Hunter had been so desperate to close was dissolving in the dark. Hunter's voice rose above the din. He was screaming a high-pitched sound that cracked with hysteria. "Manager. Where's the manager? Get these lights back on now. Do you know who I am? I will sue you into the ground." He was flailing in the dark, shoving guests aside, trying to find someone to blame. He was no longer the suave billionaire. He was a frightened child throwing a tantrum in a room he could not control. I saw a beam of light cut through the crowd. It was bright, steady, and purposeful. It did not waver. It moved directly toward Hunter Sterling, blinding him. He threw his hands up to shield his eyes, stumbling back against a marble pillar. "Who is that?" Hunter shouted. "Get that light out of my face!" The man holding the light stepped forward. It was Elias. He looked impeccable even in the chaos. His suit was unruffled, his expression serene. He held a heavy industrial flashlight in his hand, wielding it like a sword. "Mr. Sterling," Elias said, his voice projecting clearly over the murmuring crowd, "I am afraid I cannot turn the lights back on. We have received a direct order to cease all operations immediately." "Order," Hunter sputtered, blinking into the beam. "Order from who I am? The client? I am the one paying the bills. Turn the power back on, or I will destroy you." Elias did not flinch. He did not apologize. He simply adjusted his grip on the flashlight, keeping the beam centered on Hunter's sweating face. "The order came from the chairman of the board," Elias stated calmly. "He has invoked the emergency termination clause of your contract. The power has been cut due to non-payment of services in violation of the venue code of conduct." "Non-payment," Hunter shrieked. He looked around wildly, trying to find his investors, trying to save face. "That is a lie, a total lie. I paid the deposit. I gave the money to that old man. He pointed a shaking finger into the darkness towards where he thought the entrance was, towards where he thought I had been thrown out. I gave $50,000 to Reginald King. Hunter yelled, desperate to shift the blame. That senile old thief must have pocketed it. I paid him to handle this. If the bill is not paid, it is because my fiancé's father stole the money. He is a crook, a dirty blue-collar thief. The crowd gasped. Tiana, who had been standing near the fountain, let out a sob. She was watching her fiancé destroy her family name to save his own skin. She saw him throw me to the wolves without a second thought. Elias lowered the flashlight slightly. He let the silence stretch. He let Hunter's accusation hang in the air, rotting like meat in the sun. "Mr. Sterling," Elias said softly, "you seem to be confused about the chain of command. Mr. King did not steal your money." "Oh, yeah," Hunter sneered, emboldened by his own lie. "Then where is it? Where is my 50,000? And who is this chairman who thinks he can cut my lights? Bring him out here. I want to look him in the eye before I buy this whole company just to fire him." Elias smiled. It was a small, cold smile. "As you wish, Mr. Sterling." Elias raised his hand and snapped his fingers. The sound was sharp and crisp. Instantly, a single generator-powered floodlight slammed on. It was located on the roof of the main house, angled steeply downward. It created a cone of brilliant white light in the center of the driveway. I stepped into it. I walked out of the shadows and into the circle of illumination. I stood there in my blue coveralls with the grease stains on the knees. I stood there with my heavy tool belt hanging from my waist and my yellow hard hat tucked under my arm. I stood there with my scarred hands hanging loose at my sides. I looked like a laborer. I looked like a worker. But I stood like a king. The silence that fell over the Grand Royal Estate was absolute. It was heavier than the darkness had been. Every eye was fixed on me. The investors, the socialites, the Sterlings, and my daughter. Hunter stared at me. His mouth hung open. He looked from me to Elias and back again. His brain was trying to process the impossible image in front of him. "Reggie," he whispered, "what are you doing? Get out of the light, you idiot. You are ruining everything." Elias stepped into the edge of the spotlight. He turned to the crowd. He raised his voice, pitching it to reach the back rows. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "it is my distinct privilege to introduce you to the chairman of Monarch Holdings, the sole proprietor of the Grand Royal Estate and the man who built this facility with his own hands." Elias bowed slightly toward me. "Mr. Reginald King." The name echoed off the marble columns. Reginald King. Tiana let out a sound that was half scream, half whimper. She covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes bulging. She looked at the estate. She looked at the columns, the fountain, the manicured gardens. Then she looked at me. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The venue she had coveted, the symbol of wealth she had chased it, had been mine all along. She had been begging strangers for entry into her own father's house. Victoria Sterling fainted. She simply crumpled to the ground in a pile of silk and diamonds. Her husband Richard stared at me with the look of a man who realizes he has just insulted the executioner. Hunter began to shake. His head shook back and forth in denial. "No," he stammered. "No, that is impossible. He is an electrician. He fixes toilets. He is nobody. This is a joke, a sick joke." I took a step forward. The gravel crunched under my boots. The sound was loud in the silence. "I am an electrician, Hunter," I said, my voice carrying without a microphone. "I fix things that are broken, and I shut down things that are dangerous." I reached into the large pocket of my coveralls. I pulled out the first manila envelope. It was thick and heavy. I undid the string clasp, slowly letting the tension build. Hunter watched my hands. He watched the scarred fingers he had mocked. He watched them open the envelope that held his fate. I pulled out a stack of papers. They were invoices. Red ink stamped across them. I held them up to the light so everyone could see. "You said you paid the bill," I said. "You said you gave me $50,000 to secure this venue." I tossed the first page onto the ground. It fluttered and landed at Hunter's feet. "That is the invoice for the catering," I said. "Unpaid." I tossed the next page. "That is the invoice for the florals. Unpaid." I tossed the third page. "That is the invoice for the security team you hired to keep me out. Unpaid." "You did not pay a dime, Hunter," I continued, my voice rising. "You took $50,000 of debt and you tried to shuffle it around like a shell game. But you forgot one thing. When you play a shell game, you have to make sure the person watching isn't the one who built the table. Hunter looked down at the papers. He looked up at me. His eyes were wild. "I paid you," he screamed. "I transferred the money. You stole it. I did not steal it," I said calmly. "I collected it. I pulled out the document from the debt collection agency, the one that transferred his toxic debt to me. I bought your debt, Hunter. I own your loans. I own your credit lines. And as of this morning, when you failed to make a payment on this venue, I own the right to foreclose on this entire charade." I reached into the envelope one last time. I pulled out a single sheet of stiff legal paper. It had a gold seal at the bottom. "This," I said, holding it up, "is a notice of eviction and criminal trespass." The crowd gasped. The investors from Dubai began to back away, signaling to their drivers. They had seen enough. The smell of fraud was stronger than the roses. "This notice states that the contract for this event is null and void due to fraudulent financial representation," I read. "It states that all persons currently on the premises are trespassing on private property." I looked Hunter dead in the eye. "It states that you have 5 minutes to vacate my land before I have my security team remove you by force." Hunter looked around. He saw his empire crumbling. He saw the investors leaving. He saw his parents cowering. He saw Tiana staring at him with horror. He lunged. It was a desperate animal act. He screamed a raw, guttural sound and threw himself at me, his hands reaching for my throat. He wanted to kill the truth. He wanted to strangle the reality standing in front of him. He forgot that I was a man who worked with steel and wire for 40 years. He forgot that he was a boy who typed on a keyboard. I did not move. I did not flinch. Before he could reach me, a shadow moved from the darkness. It was the head of my personal security, a man named Marcus, who had been with me since the riots in '92. Marcus stepped into the light and intercepted Hunter in midair. He didn't hit him. He simply stopped him. He grabbed Hunter by the lapels of his expensive tuxedo and slammed him onto the gravel driveway. Hunter hit the ground with a wheeze. The air left his lungs. He curled into a ball, coughing and gasping. Marcus stood over him, arms crossed, looking at me for orders. I looked down at the man who had called me vintage. He was covered in dust. His bow tie was crooked. He was broken. I looked at the crowd. "The show is over," I announced. "Go home." But I wasn't done. I had one more envelope, and this one was for my daughter. I turned to where Tiana was standing, frozen by the fountain. I walked toward her. The spotlight followed me, leaving Hunter in the dark. "Tiana," I said, holding out the second envelope. She looked at me. Her eyes were filled with tears, but I could not tell if they were for me or for herself. "Daddy," she whispered. "Don't call me that," I said. "Not tonight. Tonight, I am the chairman, and the chairman has something to show you." I opened the second envelope. This was the one that would hurt the most. This was the one that would strip away the last of her illusions. Because while Hunter was a fraud, Tiana was something worse. She was a traitor, and I had the receipts to prove it. Hunter scrambled to his feet, dusting off his tuxedo jacket with frantic, jerky movements. His face was a mask of sheer panic, but his eyes held the dangerous glint of a cornered animal. He looked at the crowd, then at the investors from Dubai who were watching him with expressions that had shifted from confusion to cold suspicion. He forced a laugh. It was a brittle, high-pitched sound that cracked in the silence of the estate. "Ladies and gentlemen, please," he shouted, spreading his arms wide as if to physically push back the tide of truth. "This is a misunderstanding. A terrible prank. This man is not the chairman of anything. He is a confused old electrician I hired to fix the wiring in the guest house. He has episodes. He thinks he owns the places he works on. It is sad, really." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "Look at him. Look at his clothes. Does that look like the owner of the Grand Royal Estate? He is wearing coveralls, for God's sake. He is having a breakdown. Security, please remove him before he hurts himself or someone else." The investors hesitated. They looked at my grease-stained knees and my scarred hands. They looked at Hunter's bespoke suit and his desperate smile. For a second, the illusion held. People want to believe in the beautiful lie rather than the ugly truth. They wanted to believe they were at the wedding of the year, not a crime scene. Hunter saw their hesitation and seized it. He walked toward the lead investor, a man named Mr. Al-Sayed. "Mr. Al-Sayed, you know me." Hunter pleaded, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "You have seen the projections. You have seen the prototypes. Would I jeopardize a partnership worth millions for a venue dispute? This is sabotage. Probably corporate espionage paid for by my competitors. They hired this actor to discredit me. I watched him spin his web. It was impressive in a pathetic sort of way. He was fighting for his life using the only weapon he had left, which was his ability to lie with a straight face. I did not shout. I did not argue. I simply walked past him toward the main stage where the band had been playing earlier. The emergency generator was humming now, feeding power to the essential systems I had specified. Elias was waiting for me by the audio-visual console. He held a wireless microphone. He looked at Hunter, then at me. He handed me the microphone with a nod. I took it. I tapped it once. The sound thumped through the single working speaker tower, echoing across the lawn. "You call me an actor." "Hunter," I said, my voice amplified and clear. "You say I am playing a part, but we both know who the real performer is tonight." I reached into the second manila envelope, the one I had kept tucked under my arm. I pulled out a small silver USB drive. "You told these people you built a tech empire," I continued. "You told them you have proprietary algorithms and patents pending. You told them Sterling Future Tech is the next Apple." I plugged the USB drive into the console. Elias typed a command on the keyboard. Behind me, the massive LED screen that had been set up to display photos of the happy couple flickered to life. It was powered by the same emergency circuit I had engaged. The image that appeared was not a romantic montage. It was a spreadsheet, a bank ledger. "Let us look at the code," I said. The screen filled with rows and columns of numbers. They were highlighted in red and green. It was the forensic accounting report Alvin had compiled. It was the autopsy of Hunter's business. "This is the operating account for Sterling Future Tech," I explained, walking to the side of the stage so I could point at the screen. I saw the crowd gasp. The numbers were large, but the balances were negative. "You see this entry here dated last month?" I asked, pointing to a transfer of $200,000. "Hunter told you this was for research and development. He told you it was for server farms in Silicon Valley." The screen shifted to a scanned copy of a bank transfer receipt. "It went to a luxury car dealership in Miami," I said, "for a Lamborghini Urus, registered to Hunter Sterling." Hunter screamed, "Turn it off. That is private property. That is confidential corporate data." He tried to run toward the stage, but Marcus stepped into his path. His arms crossed his face like stone. Hunter bounced off him like a bird hitting a window. I signaled Elias to change the slide. The screen showed a flowchart. It was a circle of arrows moving money from one account to another. "This is how he pays you," I said, addressing the investors directly. "He takes money from investor A and pays a dividend to investor B. Then he takes money from investor C to pay investor A. He keeps 20% for himself as a management fee." I looked at Mr. Al-Sayed. "The money you wired him last week is a good faith deposit?" I asked. The screen changed again. It showed a wire transfer to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. "It is gone," I said. "He moved it out of the country 3 hours after it cleared. He is not building a company. He is building an escape route." The murmuring in the crowd turned into a roar. The investors were pulling out their phones, calling their bankers, calling their lawyers. The socialites were whispering behind their hands, their eyes wide with the thrill of the scandal. "And this," I said, signaling for the final slide, "is the reason we are all standing here in the dark." The screen showed a copy of the check Tiana had asked me to sign, the one for $50,000. Next to it was the debt purchase agreement I had executed that morning. "He told you he paid for this wedding," I said, my voice dropping to a low rumble that vibrated in the chests of everyone present. "He told you he was a generous host, but the truth is he is broke. He has zero liquidity. He owes money to banks, he owes money to loan sharks, and as of this morning, he owes $50,000 to me." I looked at Hunter. He was standing alone in the middle of the driveway. His parents had backed away from him as if he were radioactive. Tiana was sobbing by the fountain, her face buried in her hands. "He tried to use my retirement money to pay for this party," I said. "He tried to trick a man he calls a simple electrician into funding his fraud. He thought I was too stupid to notice. He thought I was too old to fight back." I walked to the edge of the stage. "I am not a tech genius, Hunter. I do not know how to code, but I know how to read a balance sheet, and yours is empty." The reaction was immediate and violent. The polite veneer of society crumbled. One of the investors, a man who had been laughing with Hunter earlier, threw his champagne glass onto the ground, shattering it. "You thief!" he shouted, his face turning purple. "That was my pension fund. You told me it was guaranteed." Another man lunged forward, grabbing Hunter by the lapel of his tuxedo. "Where is my money, Sterling? Where is it?" Hunter shoved the man away. He was panting, his eyes wild. He looked around the circle of accusing faces. He saw his life disintegrating. He saw the prison cell waiting for him. He looked at me. It was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. He did not see the investors as the enemy. He did not see the police as the threat. He saw me, the old black man in the blue coveralls, the man he had dismissed, the man he had insulted. "I killed him," he screamed. He reached into his jacket pocket. For a second I thought he had a gun. The crowd screamed and scattered, diving behind cars and pillars. But he pulled out a heavy metal object. It was a paperweight, a souvenir from the gift bags he had prepared for the guests. It was a solid block of crystal engraved with his company logo. He charged. He moved faster than I expected. He sprinted up the driveway, vaulting over the low hedge, his teeth bared in a snarl. He was coming for me. He wanted to smash my skull with his fake success. I stood my ground. I had faced worse men than him on construction sites in the 70s. I had faced men with crowbars and bad intentions. But I did not have to lift a finger. Marcus, who had been standing in the shadows near the stage, moved with the speed of a striking cobra. He did not tackle Hunter this time. He stepped in and delivered a single, precise blow to Hunter's midsection. Hunter doubled over the air, leaving his lungs in a wet gasp. As he bent forward, Marcus brought his elbow down on the back of Hunter's neck. It was not a lethal blow, but it was efficient. Hunter hit the asphalt face first. The crystal paperweight skidded across the ground and stopped at my feet. Marcus placed a heavy boot on Hunter's back, pinning him to the ground. He looked up at me, awaiting instructions. I looked down at the man who had wanted to be my son-in-law. He was scraping his cheek against the gravel, trying to breathe, trying to curse me. "Hold him there, Marcus," I said calmly into the microphone. "The police are on their way." I looked up at the crowd. The silence had returned, but now it was different. It was the silence of judgment. "The show is over," I said. But I was wrong. The show was not over. Because Tiana was walking toward the stage. She had stopped crying. Her makeup was ruined. Her dress was stained, but her eyes were focused on me. She was not coming to apologize. She was not coming to thank me for saving her from a fraud. She was coming to attack. I watched my daughter approach, and I felt the weight of the second envelope under my arm, the one I had saved for her. Hunter was the villain of the story, but Tiana was the tragedy, and I was about to break her heart to save her soul. Tiana did not run to her husband, who was currently pinned to the asphalt by my head of security. She did not run to his parents, who were huddled together like shipwreck survivors. She ran to the stage. She ran to me. Her heels clicked on the stairs, a frantic staccato rhythm that matched the wild look in her eyes. I stood there holding the microphone, my other hand resting on the second envelope. I waited for the tears. I waited for the apology. I waited for the daughter I had raised to break through the shell of the social climber she had become. I waited in vain. Tiana stopped 3 feet from me. Her chest was heaving. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black rivulets. She looked at the crowd, then she looked at me, and she screamed. "You ruined it!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. "You ruined everything. Are you happy now? Do you feel big? Do you feel powerful standing there in your dirty clothes, humiliating me in front of the most important people in Atlanta?" I lowered the microphone slightly, but the silence on the estate was so profound that everyone heard her clearly. "I did not ruin anything, Tiana," I said calmly. "I just turned on the lights." "You destroyed my life," she yelled, stomping her foot like a petulant child. "This was my moment. This was my launch. We had Vogue photographers here. We had investors. We had a future. And you burned it all down because your ego could not handle being left out. You are selfish. You are petty. You are a jealous old man who cannot stand to see his daughter succeed," the crowd murmured. Even in the face of her husband's fraud, Tiana was trying to spin the narrative. She was trying to make herself the victim of a vindictive father. She was trying to salvage her social standing by painting me as the villain. "I succeeded, Tiana," I said, my voice hardening. "I succeeded in building a life of honor. I succeeded in raising a daughter who had every opportunity I never had. And how did you repay me? By erasing me. By lying about my mental health. By treating me like a stain on your perfect white dress." "That is not true," she sobbed, turning to the crowd, her hands clasped in a plea for sympathy. "He is confused. He twists things. We tried to protect him. We tried to get him help. He is sick. Can you not see that he is sick?" She was doubling down. Even with the evidence of Hunter's fraud displayed on the giant screen behind me, She was sticking to the lie that I was the problem. She was betting everything on her ability to manipulate the truth. I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the panic in her eyes, but I also saw the calculation. She was not crying because she was sad. She was crying because she was losing. "You say you wanted to protect me," I asked into the microphone. "You say you wanted to get me help." "Yes," she cried. "We love you, Dad. We just wanted you to be safe." I nodded slowly. I reached into the envelope. "Safe," I repeated. "Is that what you call it?" I pulled out a small digital recorder. It was the one I had left running in my kitchen the night they came to force me to sign the guardianship papers. "Let us hear how you define safety, Tiana." I held the recorder up to the microphone. I pressed play. The sound quality was crystal clear. It blasted through the speaker tower, rolling over the lawn like a shockwave. "It is a state facility," Hunter said, laughing. "Shady Pines or something. It is cheap. It smells like urine and boiled cabbage, but hey, it is a roof over your head." Tiana froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The recording continued. "It is for the best," Dad Tiana's voice said. Cold, detached. "You will be safer there. You will not be a burden to anyone." The crowd gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the night. Tiana's face went pale white under her makeup. She shook her head, trying to deny her own voice. "But I let the tape run. Once we declare him incompetent, we can sell the house," Hunter said. "We can use the equity to pay off the sharks. Just make sure the doctor signs the papers," Tiana said. "I do not want to deal with him anymore. I do not want to visit him. Put him in the home and throw away the key. He is embarrassing." I stopped the recording. The echo of her cruelty hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "Throw away the key," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I had held back for days. "You did not want to protect me. You wanted to bury me. You wanted to lock me in a warehouse for the forgotten so you could steal the house I built with these hands." I held up my scarred hands. "You called me a burden, Tiana. You told your fiancé that I was embarrassing. Well, look around you. Look at the estate. Look at the land. Look at the empire I built while you were busy being ashamed of me." I took a step toward her. She shrank back, cowering. "I am not the burden," I whispered. "You are." The reaction from the crowd was visceral. It was not just shock anymore. It was revulsion. These were people who understood money and power, but even they had a line. And locking up your own father to steal his assets was a line that even the most cutthroat investor would not cross. They looked at Tiana like she was a monster. They looked at her like she was something rotting in the sun. The photographers who had been snapping pictures lowered their cameras. They did not want to capture this. This was too ugly even for the tabloids. Then there was movement near the fountain. Victoria Sterling Hunter's mother had recovered from her faint. She stood up, helped by her husband. She looked at the screen where her son's fraud was still displayed. She looked at Hunter pinned to the ground by my security guard. And then she looked at Tiana. Victoria walked toward the stage. She walked with a stiff, furious gait. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. She climbed the stairs. She ignored me. She walked straight up to Tiana. Tiana saw her coming. She reached out a hand, hoping for an ally, hoping for comfort. "Victoria," she whimpered, "please tell them. Tell them it is not true." Victoria Sterling did not speak. She pulled her arm back and slapped Tiana across the face with every ounce of strength she possessed. The sound was like a pistol shot. Tiana stumbled back, clutching her cheek, her eyes wide with shock. "You liar," Victoria screamed. "You dirty little liar. You told us he was crazy. You told us he was a charity case. You told us he was a drain on Hunter's resources." She advanced on Tiana, pointing a manicured finger in her face. "You said his money was gone. You said we had to support him. And all this time, he was the one with the fortune. He was the one owning the building. He was the one buying the debt." Victoria looked at me, then back at Tiana. "You let my son sign a personal guarantee to a multimillionaire," she shrieked. "You let him destroy himself because you were too ashamed to admit who your father was. You are a fraud. You are trash. You are nothing." Richard Sterling stepped up behind his wife. He looked at Tiana with cold disgust. "We are ruined," he said, "because of you. We leveraged our home to help Hunter because you said the wedding would secure the investment. You said your father was a non-entity." Tiana looked from her in-laws to me. She was alone, completely and utterly alone. Her husband was on the ground. Her new family hated her. Her old family had just exposed her. She fell to her knees. Her beautiful dress pooled around her in the dirt. She covered her face and sobbed. It was a raw, ugly sound, the sound of a world ending. I looked down at her. I felt a twinge of pain in my heart because no father wants to see his child destroyed. But then I remembered the recording. I remembered the plan to put me in a home that smelled of urine and cabbage. I remembered the look in her eyes when she told me I did not fit the aesthetic. I folded the envelope and put it back in my pocket. I signaled to Elias to cut the microphone. The silence returned. But it was not the silence of anticipation. It was the silence of a funeral. I turned my back on my daughter. I walked to the edge of the stage and looked down at Marcus. "Is the police here yet?" I asked. Marcus nodded toward the main gate. Blue lights were flashing in the distance, cutting through the darkness. "They are here, boss," he said. "And they have a warrant." "Good," I said. "Let them in." I looked back at Tiana one last time. She was still on her knees, weeping into her hands. Victoria Sterling was standing over her, screaming insults. I did not intervene. I did not help her up. She wanted to be a Sterling. She wanted the drama and the high stakes. Now she had them. I walked down the stairs past Hunter, who was groaning on the ground. I walked past the shocked investors. I walked toward the gate to meet the police. My work here was done. The demolition was complete. Now it was time for the cleanup, and I knew exactly who was going to be holding the broom. The wail of sirens cut through the night air like a knife slicing through silk. It was not a distant sound. It was immediate and overwhelming. Blue and red lights washed over the white marble columns of the Grand Royal Estate, turning the scene into a surreal, strobe-lit nightmare. The guests who had been whispering and judging just moments before now scattered like leaves in a storm. The investors from Dubai were already in their limousines, their drivers peeling out of the driveway with a screech of tires. They knew better than anyone that when the feds arrived, the only thing left to do was run. I stood on the stage looking down at the chaos I had orchestrated. Marcus still had his boot on Hunter's back, keeping him pinned to the asphalt. Hunter was no longer struggling. He was limp, defeated by the crushing weight of reality. He turned his head to the side, his cheek pressed against the gravel, and watched the police cars swarm through the main gate. There were not just one or two cruisers. There were 6 of them, followed by unmarked sedans that screamed federal authority. Alvin had done his job well. He had not just called the local police. He had called the Securities and Exchange Commission Enforcement Division and the FBI. This was not a dispute over a wedding bill anymore. This was a takedown of a financial predator. The officers poured out of their vehicles, moving with tactical precision. They wore raid jackets with yellow letters on the back. They carried weapons and warrants. They did not care about the flowers or the silk ribbons. They marched up the driveway, pushing aside the few remaining socialites who were too stunned to move. One of the agents, a tall woman with a face like granite, walked straight toward me. She looked at the man on the ground, then she looked up at me on the stage. "Mr. King," she asked, her voice carrying over the dying wail of the sirens. "I am Reginald King," I confirmed into the microphone. "We have a federal warrant for the arrest of Hunter Sterling," she said. "Thank you for securing the suspect." She signaled to her team. 2 officers moved in, replacing Marcus. They hauled Hunter up from the ground. He hung between them like a broken marionette, his tuxedo jacket torn and covered in dust, his bow tie hanging loose around his neck. Hunter Sterling, the agent announced, reading from a document in her hand. "You are under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and grand larceny. You have the right to remain silent." Hunter blinked. The reality of the situation finally seemed to penetrate the fog of his narcissism. He looked at the handcuffs dangling from the officer's belt. He looked at the flashing lights reflecting in the fountain. "Wait," he stammered. "Wait a minute. This is a mistake. I am a businessman. I am an innovator. You cannot arrest me at my own wedding." The officer spun him around, slamming him against the hood of a patrol car. The sound of metal hitting metal made Tiana flinch. She was still on her knees, her hands covering her mouth, watching the destruction of her fantasy. "Hands behind your back," the officer ordered. Hunter began to struggle. It was a pathetic, flailing attempt to regain control. "No," he shouted. "No. I did not do anything. It was not me. I am just the face. I am just the front man." The cuffs clicked shut. The sound was final. Hunter twisted his head, looking for an escape, looking for someone, anyone to save him. His eyes landed on Tiana. She was staring at him with a look of absolute horror. She was seeing her husband not as the golden ticket to high society, but as a convict. And that was when the love story ended. That was when the rat turned on its own. It was her. Hunter screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. He nodded frantically toward Tiana. It was Tiana. She made me do it. The crowd gasped. Even the police officers paused for a fraction of a second. Tiana dropped her hands from her mouth. Her jaw fell open. What she whispered. She is the one who wanted the lifestyle, Hunter yelled, spitting as he spoke. She demanded the penthouse. She demanded the cars. She told me I had to get the money or she would leave me. She is the mastermind. She pushed me to take the loans. She pushed me to fake the numbers. She said her father was rich and we could pay it all back once we got his money. He was rewriting history in real time. He was taking his own greed and painting it as victimhood. He was throwing the woman he had sworn to love and cherish into the fire to buy himself 5 seconds of sympathy. She knew everything, Hunter continued, his eyes bulging. She knew the accounts were empty. She helped me fake the deposit slips. She wrote the press releases. Arrest her too. She is my partner. She is an accomplice. Tiana stood up slowly. Her legs were shaking so badly I thought she would fall again. She looked at the man she had married. She looked at the man she had defended against her own father. Hunter, how could you? She sobbed. I loved you. I believed in you. You loved my money, Hunter sneered. You loved the idea of me. And when the money ran out, you told me to steal from your father. You told me he was senile. You told me to lock him up. Do not act innocent, Tiana. You are just as guilty as I am. The agent looked from Hunter to Tiana. She signaled to another pair of officers. Bring her in for questioning, she said. The officers moved toward Tiana. She backed away, her hands raised in surrender. No, she cried. No, please, he is lying. I did not know about the fraud. I did not know about the Ponzi scheme. I just wanted a nice wedding. Ma and one of the officers set his hand resting on his holster. We have reason to believe you were involved in the attempted guardianship fraud against Mr. King. We have witness statements and documents with your signature on them. You need to come with us. Tiana looked around the estate. She looked for her friends, but they had all fled. She looked for the Sterlings, but they were busy arguing with another officer trying to keep their own car from being impounded. She was alone, except for me. She looked up at the stage. She saw me standing there, the master of the house, the man who had brought the law to her doorstep. Dad, she screamed. Daddy, help me. Tell them I am a good person. Tell them I would never hurt you. I looked at my daughter. I saw the little girl who used to sit on my lap and ask for ice cream. I saw the teenager who practiced her valedictorian speech in the living room. But I also saw the woman who had stood in a boardroom and told her employees I was demented. I saw the woman who had handed her fiancé a pen to sign away my freedom. Tiana, I said, my voice amplified by the microphone one last time. You are not a good person. You are a person who forgot where she came from. You are a person who traded her father for a photo opportunity. But Dad, she wailed as the officer took her arm. I am your daughter. You cannot let them take me. You have money. You have power. Fix this. Please fix this. I looked at the handcuffs glinting in the blue light. I looked at the ruin of the party. I looked at the truth laid bare on the asphalt. I did fix it, I said. I turned my back. I walked away from the edge of the stage. I walked toward the back of the platform where the shadows were deep and quiet. Daddy, Tiana screamed. Her voice was raw, terrified. Daddy, do not walk away. Daddy, look at me. I did not look back. I did not stop. I heard the car doors slam. I heard the engines rev. I heard the sirens start up again, fading into the distance as they carried my family away. I walked down the back stairs of the stage. Elias was waiting for me. He looked shaken. His face was pale in the moonlight. Mr. King, he said softly. Are you all right, sir? I took off my hard hat. I unclipped my tool belt. I handed them to him. I am fine, Elias, I said. My voice was steady, but I felt a hollowness in my chest that no amount of money could fill. I am just tired. What do you want us to do with the venue, sir? He asked, looking out at the abandoned tables and the wilting flowers. Clean it up, I said. Donate the food to the shelter downtown. Send the flowers to the hospital. Burn the decorations. I want this place scrubbed clean by morning. I do not want a single trace of this night left when the sun comes up. Yes, sir, Elias said. And the investors. They left their contact information. They want to speak with you. They want to know if you are looking for partners. Tell them I work alone, I said. I walked to my truck. I climbed into the cab and sat there for a long time. The estate was quiet now. The police were gone. The guests were gone. The only thing left was the silence and the smell of ozone and regret. I started the engine. I drove out the back gate, avoiding the main driveway. I did not want to see the tire marks. I did not want to see the spot where my daughter had fallen to her knees. I drove home to my clapboard house in South Atlanta. I parked in the driveway and walked up the steps. I unlocked the door and went inside. The house was empty. It was quiet. It was exactly as I had left it. I sat down in my armchair. I poured myself a glass of bourbon. I drank it in the dark. I had won. I had destroyed the people who tried to destroy me. I had reclaimed my dignity. I had exposed the lies. But as I sat there in the silence, I realized that victory has a taste. It does not taste sweet. It tastes like ash. I closed my eyes. I saw Tiana's face as the police car drove away. I saw the fear. I saw the betrayal. I had taught her a lesson. I had taught her that actions have consequences. I had taught her that money cannot save you from the truth. But I had also taught her that her father was capable of watching her fall. I finished my drink. I washed the glass. I turned out the light. Tomorrow, I would go to the jail. Tomorrow, I would visit my daughter. But tonight, I needed to mourn. Not for the wedding that never happened, but for the family that never was. The demolition was over. Now I had to live in the ruins. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind me with a sound that felt like the closing of a coffin lid. The air in the visitor center of the Fulton County Jail smelled of industrial bleach and stale coffee, a scent that sticks to your clothes and your skin long after you leave. I sat on a metal stool bolted to the floor, my hands resting on the cold stainless steel shelf below the reinforced glass partition. It had been 3 days since the lights went out at the Grand Royal Estate. 3 days since the sirens wailed and the handcuffs clicked. I had spent those 3 days dealing with lawyers and accountants finalizing the seizure of Hunter Sterling's assets and securing the legal perimeter around my own. But today was not about business. Today was about blood. I watched the door on the other side of the glass. I waited for my daughter. When the guard finally brought her in, I almost did not recognize her. The Tiana who walked into the room was a ghost of the woman who had stood on the terrace sipping champagne 72 hours ago. The sleek designer dress was gone, replaced by a shapeless orange jumpsuit that hung off her frame. Her hair, which she had spent hundreds of dollars styling for the wedding, was pulled back in a messy knot, greasy and unkempt. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing dark circles under her eyes and blotchy skin from days of crying. She shuffled to the stool and sat down. She did not look at me at first. She looked at the phone receiver hanging on the wall. Her hands were shaking. I saw her fingernails, the expensive manicure, chipped and broken. She picked up the phone. I did the same. "Daddy," she whispered. Her voice was tinny and distorted through the receiver, but I could hear the desperation. "Daddy, you came." I looked at her. I looked for the arrogance. I looked for the shame she had shown when she told me I did not fit the aesthetic. It was gone, buried under a layer of raw fear. "I came, Tiana," I said. "You have to get me out of here," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "It is a nightmare in here, Dad. The food is inedible. The women are terrifying. I have not slept. I have not showered. Please tell me you brought the bail money. The lawyer said it is set at $50,000. You have that. I know you have that." She looked at me with wide, pleading eyes. She was not asking. She was assuming. In her mind, the revelation of my wealth had changed the dynamic. I was no longer the embarrassing father. I was the ATM. I was the solution. I leaned forward. The glass was cold against my forehead. "I have the money, Tiana," I said calmly. "I have $50,000 in my pocket right now. I have $50 million in the bank. I could buy this jail if I wanted to." Her shoulders slumped in relief. A weak smile touched her lips. "Oh, thank God," she breathed. "I knew it. I knew you would not leave me here. Go pay it, Dad. Please, just pay it so I can go home. I need a bath. I need to sleep in my own bed." She was already moving on. She was already planning her exit. She thought the checkbook was open and the lesson was over. She thought that because I had money, I was obligated to use it to shield her from the consequences of her choices. I did not move. I did not stand up to go to the clerk. I just sat there watching her. "I am not going to pay it, Tiana," I said. The smile vanished. Her face went slack. What, she asked. What do you mean you are not going to pay it? You just said you have the money. You are rich, Dad. You are the chairman. You own the estate. 50,000 is nothing to you. It is pocket change. It is not about the amount I said. It is about the value. Dad, stop playing games, she snapped, her voice rising, getting that sharp edge I knew so well. This is not the time for a lecture. I am in jail. I am innocent. Hunter tricked me. He lied to me too. I am a victim here. I shook my head slowly. You are not a victim, Tiana. You are an accomplice. No! She shouted, slamming her hand against the ledge. The guard behind her stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. Tiana flinched, shrinking back. She lowered her voice to a hiss. I did not know about the Ponzi scheme, she whispered furiously. I did not know the accounts were empty. I thought he was successful. I thought we were building a life. You knew he was trying to declare me incompetent, I said. You knew he was trying to steal my house. You signed the papers, Tiana. You stood in my kitchen and told me I was a burden. You told me I was embarrassing. You were willing to lock your own father in a state facility to pay for your lifestyle. That was different, she argued, desperate to justify herself. We thought you were losing it. We thought we were helping. Stop lying, I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through her excuses like a diamond cutter. Just stop. We both heard the recording. You wanted me gone. You wanted my money without my presence. And now you want my money to save you from the hole you dug. Tiana stared at me. Her eyes narrowed. The fear was being replaced by anger, the entitlement bubbling back to the surface. I am your daughter, she said. Does that not mean anything to you? You are supposed to protect me. You hid who you were for my whole life. You let me believe we were poor. You let me struggle. If I had known you were rich, none of this would have happened. I would not have needed Hunter. I would not have needed the loans. It is your fault, Dad. You made me this way by lying to me. There it was, the final deflection. It was my fault she was greedy. It was my fault she was ashamed of me. I did not lie to you, Tiana, I said. I never told you I was poor. I told you I was an electrician, and I am. I worked every day. I came home with dirt on my boots. I put food on the table. I paid for your college. I gave you everything you needed. But you had more, she accused. You had millions, and you lived in that shack. You drove that truck. Why? To test me, to see if I would love you even if you were nobody. No, I said. I live that way because that is who I am. I value the work, not the reward. I value the things I built with these hands. I held up my hands again, pressed against the glass. I wanted you to learn that value. I continued. I wanted you to understand that dignity does not come from a label on a dress or a zip code. But you did not learn. You looked at my life and you saw shame. You looked at my hands and you saw failure. You chased the shine, Tiana. You chased the image. And now you are sitting in a cage wearing orange because you forgot what real gold looks like. Tiana was crying again, but they were angry tears. So this is it, she spat. You are going to leave me here to rot. You are going to let your own daughter go to prison just to prove a point. You are a cruel old man. I am not cruel, I said. I am a father, and a father's job is to prepare his child for the world. I failed you, Tiana. I protected you too much. I paid your bills when you got into trouble in college. I bought you that car when you wrecked your first one. I shielded you from the consequences of your actions because I wanted you to have an easier life than I did. I paused, taking a breath. The air in the room felt heavy. But I realized something 3 nights ago when you handed that pen to Hunter. I realized that by protecting you, I crippled you. I raised a woman who thinks she is entitled to everything and responsible for nothing. I cannot save you anymore, Tiana. If I bail you out today, you will never learn. You will just find another Hunter. You will just find another shortcut. Dad. Please, she wailed, her anger breaking back into fear. I cannot stay here. I am scared. I know, I said softly. It is scary when the lights go out and there is no one to flip the breaker for you, but you are going to have to find your own light this time. I stood up. My knees popped. I felt every year of my age, but I also felt lighter than I had in a decade. Reggie, do not walk away, she screamed, slamming her palms against the glass. Dad. Daddy, I am sorry. I am sorry for everything. I will change. I promise I will change. Just pay the bail. I looked down at her. She was begging. But she was begging for the wrong thing. She was begging for an escape, not for forgiveness. "I have money, Tiana," I said, my voice final. "I have a lot of money. But that money is for people who know the value of labor. It is for people who build things, not people who destroy them. It is for people who honor their family, not people who sell them." I turned toward the door. "You have time now," I said over my shoulder. "You have nothing but time. Use it. Think about who you want to be when you walk out of those doors. Because the girl who walked in here, the girl who was ashamed of her father, she does not have a place in my life anymore." I walked to the heavy steel door. I signaled the guard. "Dad," Tiana screamed. Her voice was raw, tearing at her throat. "Do not leave me." The buzzer sounded loud and harsh. The lock clicked. I pushed the door open. I did not look back. I stepped out into the hallway, into the smell of bleach and coffee. The door slammed shut behind me, cutting off her screams. I walked down the long corridor toward the exit. My heart was breaking. Every step was a struggle. Leaving my child in a cage was the hardest thing I had ever done. It went against every instinct I had as a parent. But I knew it was necessary. I knew that if I turned around, if I wrote that check, I would lose her forever. She would never respect me. She would never respect herself. I walked out of the jail and into the bright sunlight of the afternoon. The world was loud and busy. Cars drove by. People walked their dogs. Life went on. I walked to my truck. I got in and started the engine. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I let out a breath I had been holding for days. A single tear rolled down my cheek. I wiped it away with the back of my scarred hand. It was done. The demolition was over. The cleanup had begun. Now I had one more stop to make. I had one more ghost to bury. I had to go to the courthouse. I had to testify. And I had to make sure that Hunter Sterling never hurt anyone ever again. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety, a scent I had come to recognize over my years in the construction business dealing with permits and zoning boards. But today, the stakes were not a building code violation. Today, the stakes were 15 years of a young man's life. I sat in the back row of the gallery, my hands resting on my knees. I wore my charcoal suit, the one I had worn to the rehearsal dinner where Hunter Sterling signed away his life without reading the fine print. Hunter stood before the judge. He looked smaller than he had on the night of the wedding. The arrogance had been stripped away, leaving behind a shivering boy in a prison-issue jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. His parents, Victoria and Richard, sat 2 rows ahead of me. They held hands, their knuckles white. They were not crying for their son's crimes. They were crying for the death of their name. They were crying because they knew that after today, they would be pariahs in the social circles they worshipped. The trial had been swift. The evidence I provided was overwhelming. The forensic accounting, the USB drive from the wedding, and the testimony of the investors Hunter had defrauded painted a picture of a predator who had finally been caught. But the nail in the coffin was my testimony regarding the attempted guardianship fraud. The jury had looked at Hunter with a mixture of disgust and disbelief as I detailed how he planned to lock me away to steal my home. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, his voice booming through the quiet room, "you have been found guilty on 12 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of securities fraud, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. You preyed on the trust of investors and you attempted to destroy your own family for financial gain." Hunter trembled. He turned his head slightly, looking back at his parents. Then his eyes found me. There was no hate left in them, only a vast, empty terror. He knew I was the architect of this moment. He knew I was the one who had turned on the lights. "I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison," the judge announced, slamming the gavel. Victoria Sterling let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. Richard put his arm around her, but he was staring straight ahead, his face gray. Hunter did not scream. He simply slumped forward, his forehead touching the defense table. The marshals moved in, pulling him up. They cuffed his hands behind his back. As they led him away, he did not look at me again. He walked through the side door and vanished into the system. I stood up. I did not feel joy. I felt a grim satisfaction, the kind you feel when you finally pull a rotting stump out of the ground. The heavy lifting was done, but the hole remained. I walked out of the courtroom and into the hallway. Richard Sterling was waiting for me. He looked aged 10 years and 10 days. His expensive suit hung loosely on his frame. "Are you happy now, Reggie?" he asked, his voice shaking. "You destroyed him. You destroyed my son." "I did not destroy him, Richard," I said calmly. I stopped him. There is a difference. You took everything. Richard spat. The lawyer's fees, the bail, the frozen assets. We have nothing left. We leveraged the house to pay for his defense because you cut off the funding. I looked at him. He still did not understand the mechanics of what had happened. He still thought this was just a bad run of luck. You leveraged the house, I repeated. Yes, Richard said, defiant, even in defeat. We put the estate up as collateral for the bond and the legal team. We thought he would be acquitted. We thought we could countersue you for defamation. I nodded slowly. I reached into my inside pocket and pulled out a folded document. It was not a check. It was a transfer of deed notification. You should have read the fine print on the loan you took out, Richard, I said. You went to a private lender because the banks would not touch you. You needed quick cash to save your son. Richard narrowed his eyes. How do you know that? Because I am the lender, I said. I handed him the document. The private equity firm that advanced you the $2 million for Hunter's defense is a subsidiary of Monarch Holdings. I approved the loan myself. Richard stared at the paper. His hands began to shake violently. You, he whispered. You lent us the money to fight you. I lent you the money because I knew you would lose, I corrected him. And I knew that when you lost, you would default. The terms of the loan state that in the event of a conviction, the collateral is forfeit immediately to satisfy the debt plus interest. I stepped closer to him. I loomed over him the way he had loomed over me at the rehearsal dinner when he told the waiter to bring me a kid's menu. You bet your house on a liar, Richard, and the house always wins, especially when I own the casino. Victoria came up beside him, wiping her eyes. She looked at the paper, then at me. Her face went pale. Our home, she gasped. That is our home. It has been in the Sterling family for 3 generations. Not anymore, I said. You have 24 hours to vacate. The sheriff will be there tomorrow at noon to change the locks. You cannot do this, Victoria shrieked, grabbing my lapel. You are the help. You are a nobody. You cannot take our home. I gently removed her hand from my suit. I brushed the fabric where she had touched me. I am not the help, Victoria, I said cold and hard. I am the landlord, and your lease is up. I walked away, leaving them standing in the courthouse hallway holding the piece of paper that marked the end of their dynasty. They had spent their lives looking down on people like me. Now they were going to have to look up to see where they used to live. The next day, the sun was shining bright and hot over the Sterling family mansion. It was a beautiful house, not as grand as the wedding venue, but impressive in its own right. It sat on a hill in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city, a monument to old money and old prejudices. I pulled my truck up to the curb at exactly 11:55. I sat there for a moment watching the front door. A moving truck was parked in the driveway. Men were loading boxes, furniture, and paintings. They were moving fast, not with the care of professional movers, but with the haste of an eviction. At noon, the sheriff's deputy pulled up. He nodded to me. He knew who I was. He knew I was the new owner. We got out of our vehicles and walked up the driveway together. Richard and Victoria were standing on the front steps. They were surrounded by suitcases. The Louis Vuitton bags looked out of place on the concrete like refugees from a fashion show. They watched me approach. Their faces were a mixture of exhaustion and hatred. They did not have a car. Their Bentley had been repossessed earlier that morning, another asset seized to pay the mountain of debts Hunter had accumulated. They were waiting for a taxi. The irony was sharp enough to draw blood. I walked up the steps. My work boots were heavy on the stone. I stopped 3 feet from them. Is the property vacant? I asked the deputy. Yes, sir. Mr. Sterling says they have removed all personal effects. I looked at Richard. He would not meet my eyes. He was looking at the ground, at the weeds growing in the cracks of the driveway he could no longer afford to fix. Here are the keys, he muttered, tossing a heavy brass ring onto the ground at my feet. He refused to hand them to me. He wanted me to bow. He wanted me to kneel to pick up what was mine. I did not bend down. I looked at the deputy. Deputy, would you mind grabbing those? I asked. My back acts up when I have to pick up trash. The deputy smirked and picked up the keys. He handed them to me. Victoria stepped forward. Her eyes were red and swollen. What are you going to do with it? She spat. Are you going to move in? Are you going to bring your tacky furniture and your blue-collar friends and ruin this historic home? You will never fit in here, Reggie. The neighbors will hate you. You will always be an outsider. I looked at the house. It was a symbol of everything they valued: exclusion, status. the appearance of wealth without the substance of work. I am not moving in Victoria, I said. I have a home. It is small, but it is paid for, and it is honest. Then why, she screamed. Why take it if you do not want it? Just to spite us, just to hurt us. No, I said, to repurpose it. I turned to the deputy, but I spoke loud enough for them to hear. Deputy, I want you to secure the perimeter. Tomorrow morning my contractors are arriving. We are going to gut the interior. We are taking down the chandeliers. We are pulling up the silk carpets. We are turning the ballroom into a workshop. A workshop, Richard asked, looking up, his confusion breaking through his misery. Yes, I said. I am donating this property to the city. It is going to be the new home of the King Trade Academy. Victoria gasped. Trade Academy. You mean a vocational school? Exactly, I said, smiling. We are going to teach young men and women from the South Side how to be electricians, how to be plumbers, how to be carpenters. We are going to teach them how to work with their hands. We are going to teach them the value of labor. I pointed to the grand entrance. Right there, over the door where your family crest used to hang, we are going to put a sign. It will say, Hands that Build. You are turning our home into a trade school, Victoria whispered, horrified. You are bringing those people here, to this neighborhood. I am bringing the future here, I said. I am bringing dignity here. For the first time in 3 generations, this house is going to produce something of value. It is going to produce workers. A yellow taxi pulled up to the curb. The driver honked. Your ride is here, I said. Richard grabbed the handles of 2 suitcases. He looked at the house one last time. Then he looked at me. You are a cruel man, Reggie, he said. Oh. I am a just man, Richard, I replied. And justice is only cruel to those who have lived on privilege for too long. They walked down the driveway, dragging their heavy bags. The wheels clattered on the pavement. They struggled to lift them into the trunk of the taxi. I did not offer to help. I watched them get into the back seat. I watched the taxi drive away, carrying the last remnants of the Sterling legacy. I turned back to the house. I put the key in the lock. It turned with a satisfying click. I pushed the heavy door open and walked into the foyer. It was empty. It echoed. I walked to the center of the room. I looked up at the crystal chandelier. It was beautiful, but it was useless. It gave light, but it did not give warmth. I took out my phone and called my foreman. Bring the trucks tomorrow, Marcus, I said. We have a lot of work to do. We are going to need sledgehammers. We are going to need drills. We are going to tear this place down to the studs and build something real. I walked out of the house, leaving the door open to let the fresh air in. I stood on the porch and looked out over the city. I saw the skyline I had helped build. I saw the future I was creating. The Sterlings were gone. Hunter was in a cell. Tiana was waiting for trial. But I was still standing. My hands were still scarred. And my work was just beginning. The seasons changed 4 times since the night the lights went out at the Grand Royal Estate. Spring brought rain that washed away the dust of the construction work. Summer brought heat that tested the endurance of the new students at the academy. Autumn brought leaves that crunched under work boots just like the gravel had under the tires of the fleeing limousines. Now it was winter again, but the cold did not bite the way it used to. I sat in my office, which used to be Richard Sterling's cigar room. The dark wood paneling was gone, replaced by whiteboards covered in schematics and electrical diagrams. The humidor was gone, replaced by a shelf full of textbooks on photovoltaic systems and advanced circuitry. My assistant, a sharp young woman named Keisha, knocked on the doorframe. She held a single white envelope in her hand. She did not have to tell me who it was from. I recognized the handwriting even though it was shakier than I remembered. It lacked the flourishes of the calligraphy Tiana used to practice for her wedding invitations. It came in the morning mail, Mr. King, Keisha said, placing it gently on my desk. There is no return address, but the postmark is from downtown. Thank you, Keisha, I said. She left, closing the door softly. I looked at the envelope. It sat there like an unexploded bomb. I knew where Tiana was. I made it my business to know even if I never intervened. She had served 6 months in county jail for her role in the fraud. Her lawyer, a public defender, had managed to get her a plea deal in exchange for testifying against Hunter. She was out now on probation, serving a 3-year suspended sentence. She was not working in a high-rise anymore. She was not directing marketing campaigns. No reputable firm would touch her. Her name was toxic. The last report I received from my investigator said she was washing dishes at a diner on the west side. She was living in a studio apartment that smelled of grease and failure, working double shifts to pay the court-ordered restitution. Hunter was in a federal penitentiary in Florida. He would be there until his hair turned gray. I picked up the envelope. It felt light, flimsy. It was cheap paper, the kind you buy at a drugstore. I ran my thumb over my name. Reginald King. Not Dad, not Daddy, just my name. I thought about what might be inside: a plea for money, a plea for forgiveness, an accusation, a promise to change. A year ago, I would have ripped it open. A year ago, I would have been desperate for any sign that my daughter still existed beneath the layers of greed. A year ago, I would have looked for a reason to save her. But I was not the same man I was a year ago, and she was not the same woman. I stood up and walked to the small fireplace in the corner of the office. I had installed a gas insert myself, efficient and clean. I turned the dial, and the blue flames flickered to life, dancing behind the glass. I held the envelope over the fire. I did not feel anger. The rage that had fueled me on the night of the wedding had burned itself out, leaving behind a quiet ash. I did not feel hate. Hate requires energy. Hate requires connection. I felt nothing. I realized then that indifference is the true opposite of love. Anger means you still care. Hate means you are still wounded. Indifference means the cord has been cut. I did not want to read her excuses. I did not want to read her apologies. Because words are easy. Tiana had always been good with words. She could spin a story, she could sell a vision. But she had never learned to do the work. If she was truly sorry, she would not be writing letters. She would be living a life that proved it. She would be building something real brick by brick, just like I had. Until then, she was just a ghost haunting a man who had already moved on. I dropped the envelope into the fire. It caught instantly. The cheap paper curled and blackened. The blue ink of my name bubbled and vanished. I watched it burn until there was nothing left but a gray flake of ash that floated up the chimney and out into the cold winter air. "Goodbye, Tiana," I whispered. I turned off the gas. The fire died. I turned my back on the ashes and walked out of the office. I walked down the hall to the main ballroom. It was unrecognizable from the space where Hunter had tried to hold court. The crystal chandeliers were gone, replaced by industrial shop lights. The silk carpets were gone, replaced by durable concrete flooring. The room was filled with the sound of drill saws and laughter. 50 students, young men and women from the same neighborhoods I grew up in, were working at long tables. They were wearing blue coveralls with the King Trade Academy logo on the pocket. They were learning. They were building. I walked among them. I smelled the sawdust and the solder. It was the best smell in the world. It was the smell of future. I stopped at a station where a group of 4 students was struggling with a solar inverter panel. They were arguing good-naturedly about the wiring schematic. "No, you cannot bypass the ground wire," one of them said. A tall boy named Marcus, who reminded me of myself at 20. "If you bypass the ground, you fry the system the first time a surge hits. But the diagram says the load goes here." Another boy argued, pointing at the paper. I stepped in. "The diagram assumes you are working with a standard grid," I said, "but this is a hybrid system. Look at the voltage rating." The students looked up. Their eyes widened. "Mister," King Marcus said, straightening up, "we were just trying to figure out the load distribution." I smiled. I leaned over the table, tracing the line on the schematic with my scarred finger. "You are thinking like electricians," I said. "That is good. But you need to think like engineers. Where is the fail-safe? Where does the excess energy go when the battery bank is full?" Marcus looked at the diagram, then at the panel, then at me. His face lit up with understanding. "The diversion load," he said. "We need a dump load controller." "Exactly," I said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You never build a system that cannot handle its own success. You always leave a path for the energy to go safely." The group laughed. They started rewiring the panel, their hands moving with confidence. I watched them. I saw the focus in their eyes. I saw the pride they took in getting it right. These were kids who had been told they were nothing. They had been told they did not fit the aesthetic. They had been told that her only future was in the streets or in service. But here they were, kings and queens of the trade. They were learning that their hands could build a life. They were learning that value came from what you could do, not what you could buy. Marcus looked up at me again. "Thanks, Mr. King," he said. "You always know exactly what is missing." "I am just here to turn on the lights, Marcus," I said. "You are the ones who keep them burning." I walked to the front of the room. I looked out at the sea of blue coveralls. I saw the diversity, the energy, the hope. This was my legacy. Not a trust fund for a spoiled daughter, not a mansion filled with empty rooms. This noise, this work, this potential. I had lost a daughter. It was a tragedy, and I would carry the scar of it for the rest of my life. But I had gained 50 sons and daughters. I had gained a family that was bound not by blood, but by sweat and respect. I realized that Tiana was right about one thing. I did not fit her image. I did not fit into a world of fake smiles and leased luxury. I fit here, among the sawdust and the wire, among the people who built the world. I walked out onto the front steps of the academy. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I looked down the driveway where the limousines had once idled. Now it was lined with pickup trucks and old sedans vehicles that belonged to people who worked. I took a deep breath of the cold air. Blood is random, I thought. You do not get to choose who you are related to. You do not get to choose who shares your DNA. That is just biology. It is a roll of the dice. But family is a choice. It is the people who stand by you when the lights go out. It is the people who respect the work of your hands. It is the people who tell you the truth, even when it hurts. I had chosen wrong for a long time. I had chosen to enable. I had chosen to hide. But today I had chosen right. I looked at my hands one last time. They were old. They were scarred. They were beautiful. I put my hands in my pockets and walked back inside, back to the noise, back to the work, back to my family. And for the first time in a long time, Reginald King was exactly where he was supposed to be. This experience taught me that the most dangerous lie is the one we tell ourselves about the people we love. I believe my silence was protection, but it was merely a shield for their entitlement. True wealth is not found in a bank account or a brand name. It is found in the dignity of honest labor and the integrity of one's character. I lost a daughter to greed, but I found a family and shared purpose. We must never apologize for our scars or our work, for they are the only things that remain when the lights go out. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice to cut ties with family to save your own dignity? Let me know your story in the comments below.